it's going to be one of these days, eh? I'm going to end up telling everyone.
How long you guys know each other? Like, what's the connection
time.
here? A long time?
Kev, me and you, what, 20 years? 15 years?
15 years, yeah. We went through training together.
Yeah.
You and I. Yeah.
When did you guys start?
Vince actually was a guy that trained me when I was in the
And Kev was the guy that trained me.
So who's the eldest and
Vince.
who's the youngest?
Vince.
I'm the oldest.
Seniority.
How old are you?
Going to be 53 this year.
So
you
he's
and I
not
are
the
same
oldest.
age, man. I'm going to be
I'm
53 this year.
56.
Oh, you're older?
I'm 56.
Yeah,
Shit, am I the
started
youngest one in
admission-
this group?
I just look young.
No, you know,
How old are
you're looking good.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Okay,
So who's the baby?
I got to dye my
John, you're
hair.
the baby.
I don't dye my hair.
John's the
I'm
rookie
just
on the
happy I
team
have
over
here.
here.
Right?
Okay, well, I want to welcome you guys to the construction life, and I appreciate John for setting this up. I know that when you were on the show, it was a pleasure speaking with you and getting into that. And I felt it was just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be back. It's
Yeah.
great to be back with my friends and former colleagues, and looking forward to
There's
the show.
quotations around friends or what? Like it just
No,
we've
no,
known each other a while, right?
all of these guys I consider friends, especially when you go through what we've all been through at different points in our career. It's like having a group of us that we can relate to each other. You know, that means the world to me, in as much as, you know, being able to talk about things that we've gone through and that resonate with us. Plus, it allows us to kind of laugh at other people too. So
It's a bit of a brotherhood, right? When you go through what we've
I
gone
assume
through,
you need it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't think you guys are lone
we're probably
wolves.
each other's
Like,
therapists. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm figuring out, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very appreciative that you set this up and we're having a roundtable discussion about just safety in general. And we're going to dive into what it was like, what it is, and what it could be, I guess, basically, is just the theme of the whole show to try to figure out. And obviously, if you're going to be offended, then continue listening. I don't care. Like, I don't respond to anything negative. If you want to say something negative about the show, about myself, or about the guests, and by all means, you have the freedom to do so. Will I engage with you? That's the question mark, right? I really just, I do the show to pose the questions, propose the ideas, what's going on. A lot of people talk about construction. Not a lot of people do anything about construction. That's the big hurdle. So I like to think that these conversations do something. They get somewhere with some people in the industry, right? I want to get you guys to all introduce yourselves to begin with, so we'll start with you, Kevin.
My name's Kevin Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Cobalt Safety Consulting. I have a 40-year heavy civil construction background, 3 generations deep. So been there, kind of done that, wore the boots, owned a construction company for 5 years, which I closed to become a ministry inspector, and then left the ministry to start Cobalt. This is our 11th year.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, Vince Iacolino. I'm National Director of Health and Safety for Prodigy Construction. Been there just about coming on to 5 years, but was with the Ministry of Labor previously then.
How many years with the ministry?
Off and on, actually, because I started working there in the end of 2004, left in 2008, went back in 2010, and then left in 2018.
And then how long, Kevin, were you with me?
6 3/4 of a year, not quite 7.
Okay, and we got Philip.
Yeah, my name is Phillip Ferreira. I'm the president of S1 Consulting, former Ministry of Labor inspector for, I guess, close to 7 years, 8 years or something along those lines. And yeah, just happy to be here and talking about safety and kind of talking about what we do.
You focus your attention mostly on social media these days, just to kind of see what's going on out there?
Yeah, no, definitely social media plays a big part in what we do. We have our Instagram page, my_S1, and we post a lot of videos discussing current issues that we face in the safety world, and a lot of videos and a lot of, unfortunately, injuries and fatalities and stuff that happens, and how it relates to the work that we do every day.
And then, John, just a recap on...
yeah, and John Savoia. I'm an executive in the heavy civil industry with an organization that provides temporary concrete barrier, things of that nature. I am a director of health and safety, responsible for companies across Ontario and the U.S. I was an inspector for 5 years and change, and I grew up in heavy civil, as we discussed last time. I grew up, straight out of, not even straight out of high school, from 13 years old with Dagmar Construction. So my whole life has been heavy civil and safety.
Does it take a special breed to be an inspector? Like, I'm just assuming you guys get into it maybe looking at it a certain way, but then you guys definitely leave it experiencing it a different way, right?
They don't hire, so the hiring process is is so advanced that you go through multiple stages. You go through like a cognitive behavioral test and all that stuff. So what they're looking for, as far as I remember, was A-type personalities is what they used to call it, right? They want people that can think on their feet and problem solve on their feet. So it's not something that, you know, you submit an application and you get one interview and then you get hired. It's a long process, and they do look for certain types of people. I don't want to put words in their mouth to kind of describe it for them, but it was a heavy process. Yeah,
I think for me, going to the Ministry of Labor was an opportunity to kind of come and give back. But since being an inspector, it became a calling. So it became a full passion, and because we see so many things there, you really want to come out. You really get an understanding of, we're here to help. We're here to make changes, because the stuff we do every day as safety people actually send people home, right? So I think when I went there to the ministry, I was there because, hey, this looks like a cool job. But when I left the ministry, I left because I had a massive calling to actually make a difference. So that's what my personal experience, and I know other inspectors that would probably tell you the same thing. They go in one way and they really come out with just that passion to help.
Does it take an incident for you guys to consider possibly getting into the industry, to kind of try to change the industry?
I mean, for me, what I realized was that position allowed for change. Like, you'd go on a job site, and if you issued an order, there was expected to be changes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whereas if you're working for a company in the private sector, you're going to tell them something, but what control do you have at that point, whether or not they actually do it or they don't, or even consulting, you know?
Sure.
You end up having a client, you're providing them direction or advice, but if they choose to take it, that's their prerogative. Whereas with an inspector, you know, you have the power to issue the order, and you know that it's going to be complied with, so you know that changes are going to happen.
And I think it's the big difference, too, between enforcement and your attitude as an enforcement officer versus as a consultant or a safety professional. You're looking at it from a different set of, a different perspective in what you're trying to achieve. You know, we had teams out in Mississauga, and we kept tabs on everybody in all the construction in Mississauga and Brampton. We knew what the big projects were. We knew what the expectations were for health and safety. We knew who the good players were. We knew who the bad players were, right? And
Bad didn't want to change?
well, bad players in terms of just gauging them on a level of compliance or safety. You know, you get a mixed bag in safety in different companies, you know, and we like to say there's the good, the bad, and the ugly of construction companies. And, you know, the good, they care. They make an effort. They try to change. They try to improve. And there's always that continual improvement. You know, the ugly are companies that don't care about safety, don't care about their workforce, don't care. You know, the dollar is the ultimate, most important thing.
Is there a line drawn? Because I'm just assuming that when you go into the extreme is a fatality, right? Mm-hmm. But then I guess the least thing is maybe a lid. You know what I mean? Not wearing it, right?
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out, is there a line drawn with different companies and different job sites where it's like, it's just a lid. It's just PPE. It's just like that. But until we actually have a real problem, like a fatality, do we jump on board?
It's a good question, Manny. I would look at it as, we're not really looking at companies specifically from a targeting standpoint, if you ever say that. To me, if you're not wearing hard hats in construction, that's a symptom. It's like you can't even get the most basic part of safety right. So that's kind of an indication for an inspector, hey, I might need some attention. We would go into those sites a little more because we understand that maybe their level of safety or level of understanding, to tell you the truth, sometimes is not where it needs to be. And so those are the situations where sometimes I would look at that and say, okay, hard hats, what else is not here? Like if you're not doing hard hats,
something that's simple.
You might not be doing engineering. You might not be doing fall protection. You might not be doing the things you need to do. And, you know, to go in and to find those things that are really making those issues, to bring those to light, and then to help those companies understand that they got to correct those situations. That's kind of when we say
it's not hard to kind of tell what's going on when you show up to a job site and you're doing an inspection. If the site is pristine and a guy's not wearing a hard hat, then it's an issue with that individual. It's not.
Yes.
It's not an issue with the company or whatever. But
it's a reflection of the company.
To a certain degree.
To a certain degree?
Yeah, because they're
a representative.
There's inspector discretion. You know, it's the same way when in training classes, when we talk about safety and inspector discretion. You know, can a police officer give you a ticket for doing 105 on the 401? Sure.
Of course.
but they're not going to. The chances are, 105. No, they'll wait till someone does 120, 125, right? And I think the same thing goes for a good seasoned inspector. You need to target and focus your energy on, the top hazards, the things that are going to kill workers, the things that are going to seriously injure people. You arrive on a job site to do an inspection, you see one guy not wearing a hard hat. Hey, put it on. You can have simple as that,
Yeah.
right? But you go onto a job site and you see 10 guys not tied off, right? Your discretion is going to be,
a recipe.
You're inviting a lot of questions, you're inviting a lot of problems, and you're inviting potential charges, right? So, there is some discretion for inspectors to determine and target what is most important.
I think when we look at, like as Vince was saying, if the site is in pristine condition and then, there's one person not wearing a hard hat, you'll generally tell that individual to put the hard hat on, but you're going to issue the forthwith order anyway, because as an inspector, if you see it and say something, you write it down. So, and the four of us were all from very reactive offices. Vince and I were from Toronto West, which is Toronto proper, so ground zero at the Ministry of Labor. Kevin and Phil spent a lot of time in the Etobicoke and Peel area while, they were blowing up. So being very reactive, we have to respond to all complaints, right? We can't just wash it out. So if I was getting 50 complaints a week, let's just say, I would then have to triage them to figure out which ones I was actually going to deal with at that time. So if it was, Tuesday morning and I got a call and I got 4 complaints, one was washrooms, one was hard hats, one was fall protection, and one was trenches, I'm obviously going to go to the trench and the fall protection one first to avoid the hard hat and the washroom, not because I wanted to avoid that, but we have to triage them based on the level of harm that those actions can cause. So I think, to Vince's point, you asked the question just to follow up about a reflection on the organization if the one person's not wearing a hard hat. You know what, I'm going to say no, in as much as you'll have a company, say it's a condo building company, right? We'll say Ellis Don, for example. Ellis Don has, they invest millions upon millions into their safety teams. They have, robust safety programs, but you're doing a condo that's 60 stories. You may miss what's on floor 57, right? Because you're on floor 40. So I think we can't really look at it as a reflection of the entire organization unless, we're walking through, let's just say me and Vince go to a site together and Vince says, I'm going to take floors 30 to 60. You're going to do 1 through 30. And then we reconvene and all of those floors had issues. Then we're going to look at it as a systemic problem with the organization itself. But if you're looking at sites that have, one individual doing something wrong, it's like I said last time, right? Safety is very individual. Just as much as it is a group effort, right? Because you can have a company that, does great FLHA hazard assessments and all that stuff, and they have all their paperwork is on point, and then you have the one individual who's working, a glazer, right? Working on a different floor, says, I don't care about any of this, right? I can't take that glazer's attitude to blanket the entire organization. Now, if your whole site is like that, chances are, you're going to get shut down and we're going to have a good time doing it. So
the whole Occupational Safety Act is built off of what's called an internal responsibility system. So all parties have a responsibility. And I think from an inspector standpoint, when we go there, we're evaluating against that system holistically on the whole site. So, maybe it's just a worker issue. It could be, maybe I have a supervisor. I might have a crew issue. It could be a constructor issue. But holistically, they're kind of looking at the whole perspective. And I think maybe you guys could speak to that. But we're not just looking at a thing and applying that one thing to everybody. It's more holistically, just as John's point would be.
And again, to that point, we also, as inspectors, and again, we're not inspectors now, but as inspectors, you're also taking a look at the phases of work that are happening on the project, what type of construction project it is, what are the main hazards associated with the type of work that is being done. If you have a low-rise site that's building 400 houses and you have 42 carpentry crews on site, fall protection is definitely going to be on the top of your list.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're going to be looking for, and that's what you're going to be enforcing. Because at that moment, in that snapshot of time, this is the biggest hazard. People falling off roofs or carpenters falling. If it's an excavation, you're looking at other potential hazards, trenches, you name it. But we still have the top 4 or top 5 killer contraventions in this province. Falls, electrocutions, trench collapses, struck by, crushed by, right? So, unfortunately, the numbers are still pretty high. I think the recent stat, though, was 16 traumatic fatalities for Ontario for last year. I didn't see the occupational
60?
16
in construction.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
Construction.
That's just construction, though. That's not taking into account, mining or farming or industrial settings. So when you're looking at just construction in and of itself, 16 is a high number. Mm-hmm. Like last time I was here, I said that the entire U.S. had 38 trench collapse fatalities in 2018. That's the entire U.S., 38 trench collapses. Just trench collapses. That was the highest that it's been in a decade prior to that. So when you're looking at fatalities, 16 is a high number. And you're not even taking into account, all of the critical injuries that have gone reported and even the ones that have gone unreported.
Yeah.
There is a lot of underreporting when it comes to safety. And look, I think that those of us who came from industry, Kevin and myself, I'll easily tell you that there were times that I hurt myself at work too, and then went to the hospital and said I did it at home. It was that connection to the company. It was not wanting to stir the pot. As a result, my back isn't, my back should be for a 38-year-old. So it's
What about the whole world of illegals? You got migrants coming in, and you got companies taking advantage of labor.
I've always had one opinion on that. If they're coming to work here, they work safe, right? So I don't look at people as, are you legally here, not illegally here? It's still, if they're coming to work
Safe.
somewhere, somebody needs to protect their safety. That's how I've always approached it from a safety perspective. I don't care who you are. If you're coming to work and you go to work, then safety is something that should be afforded to you as a person, no matter what.
I think the biggest issue and what I think the term that they used to use is vulnerable workers. And I think vulnerable workers have a higher risk or a higher chance of being used and abused by shady construction companies. Now, I did the quadruple fatality on Christmas Eve, the Metron case where the swing stage opened up. So that was my case. And, that company, those guys were pieces of shit, right? That supervisor, scumbag. Have no problem abusing these workers, right? And this is the type of shenanigans that happen in this province. In Metron, we had, when we went to go serve the summonses, we had, 12 guys living in one apartment. Passports had been seized, right? No training. Nobody spoke any English. It's just all the ingredients for a disaster. And it still happens. And it happens actually on a bigger scale these days. You have a lot more vulnerable workers. A lot more.
Is it because of the pressures coming from the top down, where it's like, we're not building enough, we're not building fast enough, we need more people in the industry?
No, it all comes down to money. At the end of the day, if I can pay you, like if I get, let's just say I get a bunch of workers from Brazil and then I sub them out to you and I charge $26 an hour in an invoice, right? And then I pay those workers $13 an hour cash.
It's pimping.
It all comes down to, money and off the books and things like that. Now, to be fair, I don't have a lot of experience in that world. I haven't been exposed to that type of stuff, but as inspectors, we knew it was happening. We had underground economy initiatives that we all participated in. I think Vince and I, we always worked together on the underground economy stuff, which was done in joint with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services.
And finance.
And finance, right? And what we would do is we would go out on weekends or evenings and look for, realistically, they were 9 out of 10 times they were roofing companies that had either illegal workers doing cash work. Now, even though that wasn't the purpose of our focus there, we only focused on the safety, right? So even though we had this whole initiative, but in terms of the immigrant workers, I remember a story. I don't know if you remember, but it was a Saturday, and we were down at the Weston and Finch area, and we came up to this house, and there's all these roofers there, some Albanian guys, and none of them were tied off. I called him off the roof, and he got real aggressive with me. And then finally, I think, he pulled me over to the side, and he's like, look, I'm not supposed to be working here. And I was like, okay, look, number one, I'm not here for that, right? I don't need to see a work permit. I don't need to see any of that. I just want you to tie off so that if you fall, right, your fall's going to be arrested, or even better, prevent the fall. So we did come into contact with people who should or should not have been working in the country. I think, to Kevin's point, our predominant focus as inspectors at that time was to make sure that regardless of where you came from, you're going to get back there in one piece, right? Whether you came from Brazil and you're going to go back to Brazil in 6 months, or whether you're going back to Albania or wherever else, my job was to make sure that you made it back. I had a case one time where a roofer tried to extend an aluminum ladder, and he was wearing running shoes, right? And it arc flashed with a 27,600 volt line. And when I got the call, he was VSA, right? So he was vital signs absent. And what ended up happening was the paramedics brought him back essentially, found his pulse. And he was brought to Sunnybrook. I think it was floor 5 was the burn unit at that time. So I'm doing this whole investigation. It was an infill house, and I go to the hospital, and the occupational health nurse there was like, look, he's in an induced coma. You might want to come back in 5 weeks. So I said, no problem. I'll come back and talk to him in 5 weeks. That individual was so scared that when I went back in 5 weeks, he had checked himself out. This is a guy who died and was brought back to life, had serious burns, checked himself out of Sunnybrook, and then, teaming up with, the police and going to his address and even the CBSA at that point in time. Turns out he completely left the country. So this is a guy who was trying to earn a living roofing, was electrocuted, died, brought back, spent 4 weeks in the burn unit at Sunnybrook, and then was so scared of the repercussions of him even working that he went back to Eastern Europe. So we did come into contact with these people, especially in Toronto in the infill housing. We came into contact with them frequently, but it was never our focus where they came from. I just
still
wanted
goes on today.
Oh yeah,
Massive.
I mean,
even
you got to remember, when we were at the ministry, it was the MOL. It was just the Ministry of Labor.
Yeah.
Now they've added a bunch of letters to the name.
What's the official name now?
I don't know.
MILS.
Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Trades, and Skills Development.
But it's like Skydome. I still call it Skydome.
Right.
I will never call it.
No, but they just added a bunch of different departments or different elements to the actual ministry. For us, it was just the Ministry of
Training,
Labor.
Skills Development now.
Yeah.
So they got a bigger portfolio than they used to have. That's all.
With less inspectors.
And less inspectors.
There's fewer inspectors now.
Yeah,
Who's going to touch this one?
There's
they went through
430,000 known workplaces in Ontario. They'd be lucky if there's less than 400 inspectors right now.
total. That's across all programs.
What was the last
all
stat?
Ontario.
It would take 150 years for the Ministry of Labor to inspect every single workplace in the province of Ontario.
So where do we find more inspectors?
Toronto. I would say city centers. You're going to have a lot more in Ottawa and Toronto.
They've gone out. They've gone out and done the hiring blitz, and they haven't found enough people to actually apply for the job, simply because the numbers in terms of the salary that they're offering in comparison to the private sector is well below.
It's not even the salary. It's like me. I'm just saying, guys, I would never do what you guys have done. I don't want to be in that situation.
I think everybody's in a skilled trade deficit right now. We're missing a lot of workers in Ontario, and the ministry is in the same deficit. They're trying to find people.
I don't know. That's a hard one because, if we're talking about labor and labor shortages, you see lineups at Tim Hortons at 5:30 in the morning of people that want jobs. You see lineups down the street of people that are going to job fairs. There definitely are some sectors, doctors, nurses, who knows, that definitely need more workers, more skilled workers. And in construction, it's definitely always a shortage of skilled, hard workers, right?
But it goes back to John's point about the profit. This is where I get a little upset about, I guess I'll point the finger at high-rise, mostly commercial or high-rise construction, where it's about the numbers. And you got above-line numbers that have to hit certain targets.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter who the below-the-line numbers are. They're basically just a punch card at that point.
Be honest, though, man. you were in construction, I was in construction. It's always a production-based business,
Of course.
right? So it's money-focused. And that
Production versus safety is always the epic battle.
well, and it should never be production versus; it should be production with,
Yeah,
right?
they
That's
gotta
the problem.
run parallel to each other.
It's not a fight between the two; it's a parallelization of the two, so that they both run together, right? We don't sacrifice quality to get production either, because you have to go back and do the work again, right? So the idea is that safety is not an opposing force against production; that safety is with production. So if you have production that's done safety with good quality,
And I think
Yeah,
when
you
you're
just
talking
find
about
the balance there.
it's a balance.
Right? That's
Everything's
what
a
it
balance.
is. It's definitely a balance.
Yeah, if all you did was safety and no production, you'd go broke.
Yeah,
And if all you did was production and no safety, well,
course.
it might be the same
You
game.
need both. It's yin yang.
and there's a big difference too. I mean, so my exposure in heavy civil, this is government contracts, right? So you're working under the MTO or you're working under a municipality to build a road, right? So there's kind of established norms in terms of profit that you're going to make, like certain percentages are just kind of accepted across the industry. When you get into the private world, and when I say private, I mean low-rise res or condos and ICI, things of that nature. I think that's where you're going to see more of the disparity, and profit's going to be a bigger driver.
Yeah.
Not to say that profit's not a driver in heavy civil, but if the MTO tenders out work for a 10-kilometer stretch of the 401, you're going to get, generally speaking, the same people bidding the job: the Acons, the GIPs, the Dufferins, the Dagmars, and Bot. You kind of know where you're going to be in a ballpark, and you're bidding it for a certain understood and accepted profit margin. Right now, if you get extras along the way, so you run into some issues that require some extras, that's where you're going to see some money. But when you get into the low rise and ICI, that's when you get into the piecework, and that's when you get into getting the houses built quicker to be able to sell off quicker. It's like that's kind of like in my opinion, you have, and look, I'm biased because I love heavy civil, but that's kind of where you get into the wild west of construction, where you have a $300 million condo going up, right? And the quicker you get it done and the cheaper you get it done, the more money that you're going to make.
It's the financial hands, that's all it is.
Yeah, versus a contract with, the MTO or a municipality for their roads or sewers or, something like that. So you have differences in industry.
So unfortunately, so you were saying 7 years as a...
Yeah, 7 years. Yeah.
And 6, 5? 5 and 3 quarters, no.
If you want to count it from the beginning,
Yes, counted from the beginning.
15 years.
15 years.
With the
Okay, and then,
That's same as Kevin, about 7 years.
And you're
5 and change.
5 and change, right? So you guys have all been a part of fatalities, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I think in this room, how many
Too many.
fatalities?
A lot.
Definitely over 30, 40.
I've personally done 270 critical and fatality investigations.
Yeah, but just fatalities, guys?
No,
Or
just
fatalities is
10?
outside of the
47?
ministry, though.
47?
Oh, man, I'm not
Outside of the
counting.
ministry and inside the ministry.
Total in my career.
In his
Yeah.
safety career.
So when you guys left, was the industry better?
It's the same. It's
Where, the safety world? The
Yes.
safety industry?
the
I think it's
same.
gone worse.
that's your, and again, you're gonna have different exposures to different things. It's like I said last time I
I
was
see
here.
it getting better, to tell you the truth.
You see
Yeah.
it getting better?
Yeah.
It's different.
We're not having the hard hat conversations like we used to
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Fall protection is getting better. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But neither were seatbelts when it first came in. Things take time to move through, but you're seeing a lot more as safety becomes more and more required, especially in the provincial bidding side of stuff.
Yeah, but
That's my
Sorry,
opinion.
go ahead.
I think whatever was the problem before is still a problem now.
Right.
I can tell you, for me, my experience, I had a catchment area, we went based on postal codes, and I concentrated on infill housing. I didn't bother with the high rises, because I can go to a 40-story high rise and maybe issue 3 orders at the end of the day. I can go to one house and issue 7 pages of orders. And
I just want people that are listening to understand that you guys are not out to enforce orders. You guys are out to educate how to be safe.
up to a point.
It's part of
Yeah.
it's part of the actual role. I mean, you are enforcing the act and the regulations. I mean, I think as a good inspector, you are educating as well.
tough love.
Yeah. There's a difference too. I mean, as an inspector, you're an agent of the crown, right? So you are an enforcement officer. So there's times where, I'm going to an infill house and I'm shutting down the entire scaffold system, and the person's begging me, like, please tell me how to fix this. And I can't tell you how to fix it, because then I would make the government liable for if I tell you how to fix it wrong.
But you would give them
put up some guardrails.
direction.
Yeah, put some
give them
pins in.
direction, right? You'd give them direction.
Maybe
You'd
tie
issue
in your
the orders.
scaffold.
Yeah, you'd issue the orders so that what they had to do was clear. But there were a lot of circumstances, and I think that this is why most of us who have left, and we're not the only ones that have left. I think that's why most of us who have left to be on the proactive side, so that I can help you with the how to. Right, as opposed to going there and saying, here's your order under Section 128 for, your scaffold or whatever. And then you look at me and go, okay, well, I understand this is what I have to do. How can I do this when I've got it set up like this? And I just kind of have to go, figure it out and call me when you're done. The ministry does not, so it's proactive. Like I said last time, there's proactive components to being a Ministry of Labor inspector. But it's not proactive like the private side is, where I can now sit with you. We can figure out this issue. We can come up with different solutions. We can, establish which controls are going to work, and we can evaluate those controls.
But it's a shame that the government is not allowing that because of liability.
Yeah, it's the officially induced error.
Yeah,
Officially
that's
induced
exactly
error,
what it's
yeah.
called, an officially induced error. So if I tell you don't have to wear a hard hat, and then you don't wear a hard hat and get hurt, you're going to say the ministry told
ministry.
you.
Right, yeah,
So that's called an officially induced error. So
So it's a proactivity.
we're not in that. That's not the position. The ministry is an enforcement agency, right? Just like a police officer, they're an enforcement agency. They serve a role within the actual system itself. They're there to check the system. Without an enforcement agency, the laws mean nothing anyways, right? So you have to have that check. And I know when all of us did that job, we were professionals in that job and the roles that we were in. To John's point, when we've left, we've come out on this side. Myself personally, how do I help? Right? Here's how to. Here's the things you need to do. Here's better education. Here's better ways to do it ahead of time. So we are not showing up and coming to the fatalities. We're not showing up and you're being shut down by the Ministry of Labor. We're able to say these are the things you should be looking at now, so you never get yourself into the situations where we used to have to respond to.
Yeah, preventing problems, I guess, is the number one focus of our businesses these days. And solving problems and being proactive is always a number one focus. And me and Kevin spend some time doing reactive stuff where we get calls. Hey, I've had a critical injury. Hey, we've had a fatality. Can you come here and give us assistance, run point on this investigation, whatever it may be. Right? So we still help out in those ways and still involved with criticals and fatalities in those ways. But, just going back earlier and talking about safety and why I personally think it's gotten worse, I honestly... there's a scale of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the good, and these are companies that are operating at 7, out of a scale of 1 to 10, 7, 8s, 9s. I've never seen a company that's at 10. Never happened. I've never seen a job site that's at 10.
Well, the safest site is one with no workers, right?
Well, yeah. That's the new
But now you
attitude
get
of
thieves
safety.
that get on that job site, then they get hurt.
That's a
And
whole
but they're
different.
not
That's a whole,
workers.
that's
They're
a
not-
whole
they're not
other
paid,
enforcement
man.
agency.
They're not paid.
Out of our
Let them get hurt.
jurisdiction. Out of our jurisdiction.
But I think the good companies have stayed good over these last 5 years. I think the divide between the good and the bad has grown a bit in terms of if there's no enforcement, maybe we can get away with more shit.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be more no enforcement because you're not having enough inspectors to actually go and supervise.
So what was the last tally in the Toronto office? Maybe
Toronto
11?
Toronto
10?
never had in my time at the ministry. I got in 2013, right at the beginning of 2013. Toronto and Vince. So Vince and Kevin were actually two of my training inspectors. Vince and I did. Yeah, Vince and I actually, the first fatality I ever did, Vince was my secondary on that, right? So I think, but when I got into Toronto office, Toronto's kind of like the proving ground, and then everybody leaves. They'll transfer out to the Newmarket office, or they'll transfer out to Peel, or they'll go to the Port Perry area, whichever
Durham,
office that is.
yeah,
The Durham area, which is Scarborough office.
So
So
one they can afford to actually.
yeah, Toronto was a regular office. I think Newmarket had like 21 inspectors, and Peel had like 18, 20 inspectors. Toronto, at the worst, I think we were operating with 7 of us for the whole city, and this is ground zero for construction.
Yeah.
It's the largest construction corridor in North America is from Scarborough to Peel region, Right?
So it's
very busy.
in this
I think
area
at the most we
alone.
only had 15 inspectors at the Toronto office. No, or were we
At
saying
least they
more?
had 7. We had 7 that were
Oh my
active.
God,
These
I
numbers
don't
are just staggering. I just don't understand.
Oh, I remember a time there was only 4 inspectors, man, because of leaves and stuff like that. And how do 4 or 5 or even 10 or even 25? How do you contain and manage the amount of construction that's happening?
So
in the city?
what is the government doing? Because I know that last year the Ministry of Labor Ontario, Monty, he left, and there's an interim right now going on. So I guess somebody else is going to be stepping in soon.
No, Piccini's the
Yeah,
David,
there's
David
a-
Piccini's the Minister of Labor, and look, I think that that Mr. Piccini's he's picking up on what Monty started, and he's doing a great job.
Okay.
Vince, alluded to it earlier. The ministry is trying. They are trying to fill these roles, and for whatever reason, I mean, the reality of it is this, right? So you don't go to the government to make money. You go to the government for a good work-life balance. So, an inspector, there's a point in time where, it was 8 to 4 door to door is what I used to call it, right? You start at 8, you end at 4, you leave your house at 8, you're back in your door at 4. Now, if you lived in Toronto or if you worked in Toronto and lived in Innisfil, that gave you 3-4 hours of working time. But it's a great work-life balance. I think that the government of Ontario does their best to protect workers. I won't slag the Ministry of Labor in any way, shape, or form. They do their absolute best. Their hearts and minds are in the right place. I think that as an inspector, number one, the job in Toronto in particular is very, very taxing.
Very busy, very reactive.
Busy, very reactive.
I go to 2 accidents a day for some of those.
Right,
Oh, yeah,
right.
sure.
And at the end of the day, as Vince alluded to earlier, there's more money to be made on the private side. And again, like I do safety vocationally. It's like I said to you last time. There are more days than ever where I would rather be in a dozer again, right? Or grading a road again. So safety for me is vocational based on the experiences that I've had and the fatality investigations that I've done. And I remember all of their names and their circumstances. So it's more vocational that I continue to do safety. But I think that for the most part, when somebody applies to the Ministry of Labor, it's really for one of 2 reasons. One, the golden handcuffs, right? I get a great pension. I can retire. If you start at 25, you can retire at like 49, 50, whatever it is. Or because they enjoy safety. Now, here's the honest truth, and it might be a little, what's the word I'm looking for?
Spicy.
It might be a little spicy, but people who truly love, inspectors that truly, truly love safety end up on the private side. And I think that,
They listen?
I think that when you end up on the private side, you make more of an impact.
Yeah.
I've made more of an impact in industry as a private side safety professional than I have as an inspector, because as an inspector, I was there to enforce, and people know that. People know that. They see that Ontario truck drive by, and it's like mice scurrying into holes. And
It's like that adage, right? You give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Yeah. As an inspector, you're there and you're dealing with that situation at that particular time, and there is no education for the most part. You may provide them direction on how to go get educated. You can let them know that there's consultants out there to help them out, but you're only dealing with that particular situation. On the private side, you're explaining, this is what legislation is, this is how we have to, or what we need to put in place to comply with all this stuff, and it's a different attitude, right?
Yeah, I think all of our experiences as enforcement officers, we all have stories that can fill a book in terms of, how we enforced and different charges we've laid in prosecutions and people that deserved it. And, there are a lot of different types of employers out there. And on this side, there's employers that are very receptive to health and safety. They want to make a change. They've either had an injury or they've been charged. Usually those are the 2 ways that a company kind of embraces change. It does take that.
Sometimes. I mean,
Sometimes.
I know. I mean, the push for some of these safety accreditations and government contracts holding, using that as a caveat in order to get work, plays a part in people changing their attitudes and knowing that they have to do certain things in order to improve their safety program. It's not just whether or not they've had a bad experience, but suffice to say that it definitely happens for a good portion of companies out there.
For me personally, I found that inside the ministry, being an inspector was great. I loved the job, but I learned that I was an educator because we did spend time on site. We did talk to people. So by leaving and coming onto this side, I liked being a coach more than a cop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we're able to influence a lot more, I think, on this side from our previous experience. And to Vince's point, there is a lot of companies out here that really want to do it. They just want to be told the truth. They just want to know, what do I have to do? Right? It's not how, it's what do I have to do and how do I do it? Right? And sometimes those how-to conversations are missing. And if you get them understanding that it's good for their bottom line too. Let's be honest. If you're doing safety, you're doing production, you're doing quality, and you're doing them well, there's clients that are looking for you. There's contracts that are looking for your company because the liabilities are huge for everybody.
It's one thing that I say when it comes to the bottom line of any company. To improve the bottom line is to maximize the amount of money that comes in and minimize the amount of money that goes out. Right. Whatever's left, you're making safety. If you have a good safety record, you are going to be able to price that job, be on that tenders list and whatever. And on the other end, you are reducing the amount of money that's going out in terms of compensation claims or having your job shut down or accidents and charges and stuff like that. So we affect both ends of that spectrum. Right?
Save money. Safety saves money. Right? Safety doesn't make money unless you have a consulting company. Guys.
Well, here's a dumb question for the
it saves
government. Why doesn't the government just hire you guys at your rate?
Phil and I were talking about this on the way over. This was
is that not a possibility?
It's to be an officer of the Crown, to be an agent of the Crown. You have to be sworn in as an officer of some sort. So you have a peace officer, which is a police officer, mm-hmm. right? You have a provincial offenses officer, which is the Ministry of Labor, the MOE, and the Ministry of Natural Resources. So you can't deputize, it would be very difficult for the government to just deputize random people on the outside of the government that aren't subject to internal PMP. Right, policy and procedure and things of that nature. So,
they're making up stuff these days. So why can't they just make up that?
I can't really speak.
I mean,
to
no.
that,
Okay, get rid of the procedures, but doesn't that make sense? Like, if this is about saving money and creating a workforce of safety and having more and more people that are in the industry be aware of safety, why not hire the individuals that know exactly they know how to handle it? But pay them their rate. So whether that rate is 2 times or 3 times or 4 times, whatever it is, why can't we have that workforce coming in and maintaining it?
But they had them.
They had them at the time there.
They had them. They trained a lot of inspectors. They put a lot of money into our training, let's be honest, right? And they just don't draw from their own knowledge bank enough. Like, they literally have a great group of people that are out there day in, day out with their feet in the trenches. And they just got to draw from their own knowledge. I actually had this conversation with one of the ministers many years ago. You have a massive knowledge base of people that can help you know how to change. You just got to go talk to them. And it's just like any workplace, your workers always know what needs to be done. So go talk to your workers. And
we had
you
good
learn
advocates.
A lot about safety that way. Right?
We did have good advocates. I mean, look, the Ministry of Labor is a ministry under the Ontario government, right? So when we talk about political workplaces, like everyone likes to make the joke, the workplace is political. You don't get more political than politics, right? So we've had some very good advocates throughout our time at the Ministry of Labor. Some, ADMs, assistant deputy ministers, and things like that have been very much on our side, like Peter Agruso, who retired now. Mm-hmm. He was an awesome ADM, like always on the side of the inspectorate. Again, there's so much that I think that we didn't know and don't know. We didn't know while we were inspectors, and we don't know now that we're, former inspectors. There's a lot of things that kind of happen on the government politics side that just prevent certain things from changing. I mean, to answer your question, like OSHA in the U.S., they don't have nearly the amount of active inspectors that the Ontario Ministry of Labor has across all workplaces, but OSHA puts the onus almost entirely on the employer, right? So you have an accident, OSHA says, okay, send me your report, right? And then from that report, they'll decide whether, and again, it's dependent on severity and things like that, but OSHA will then decide, you know what, based on what you've told me here, I think that it's worth this citation for you. We believe that you've contravened, standard 1926, which is the construction standard, right? And then they'll issue the citations based on the report that you provide. Now, if it's the Ministry of Labor, the inspector themselves will issue the fines under Part 1 of the POA. The inspector will issue the fines, and then the legal services branch from the Ministry of Attorney General, they'll issue the Part 3 fines. But it's, back to your point, like, you can't really privatize safety, but if there's going to be disagreements across the board to this, but if you look at the way that OSHA in the U.S. is run, I think that it's more indicative. You're going to have problems across the board.
It feels like a privatization.
But it's going to be, you're more compelled as an organization to try and do better because OSHA works differently, number one. But at the same time, they've put the faith in the industry to say, look, I don't need to come out and police you every step of the way. Yeah. I don't need to hire.
It's no different than, so if you go into into Quebec, for instance. Here, if you're building something, you need to have the plumbing inspector to do an inspection. You need the electrical inspector to come and do an inspection. In Quebec, nope.
I know,
right? And they rely on your expertise, and then if you do screw up, then that's a different story. Then you're going to be held accountable for a long period of time. But they rely.
But there's a little bit of corruption in that system.
A
little.
I get it.
Being very facetious about it.
Yeah.
But it's the liability.
But I'm just saying it's a different system versus the way it is here, right? And OSHA is no different.
How's their safety record?
Quebec.
In line with Ontario.
Yeah.
See, the thing
every province is different when it comes to safety laws. This is actually a problem in Canada. Like, if you change provinces, you get a whole new set of legislation.
Yeah.
So how is a fall in Quebec any different than a fall in BC? And why are we as a Canadian government or as a country not just harmonizing at least the killer contraventions?
Let's just hold off on giving the feds more power, though.
It's not even that, giving them more power. Let's get down to a conversation that needs to be had.
Making our system
efficient.
Why is the conversation only had when we actually increase our numbers?
The liability is huge. And I think in systems like Quebec and in OSHA in the U.S., the liability is insanely bigger. Right? In Ontario, you're doing, you could be a company that does $50 million a year, and all of a sudden there's a fatality, and you can look at the court records, right? Maybe you get $200,000 of fines. You did a project that was $50 million. Like, that $200,000 of fines is not going to, it's not going to change the way that you think, deterrent. Right? It's not an adequate deterrent in Ontario versus, in the U.S. with OSHA. First of all, you have OSHA who can refer you to a state's district attorney for criminal, charges. Wow. But on top of that, the civil litigation, the nature of civil litigation in the U.S., there's more deterrence in other jurisdictions to make sure that you have safety on the up and up on the internal side than there is in Ontario. And I'll be honest with you, to me, you don't put a price on a human life. No. But all of a sudden, I'll see the Newswire report come down. It's like, steel company in Ontario fined $60,000 for the death of a worker. So what you're telling me there at that point in time, and look, I understand that the Ministry of Labor themselves can't really change that, and that's more on the Ministry of Attorney General and the court systems. But what you're telling me there is you're telling me that $60,000 was the price that you deemed this person's life was worth. And the organization may or may not care. They may say, okay, well, at 60,000 plus the 100,000 we spent in legal fees, 160,000. How much did we make this year? Okay, we're still in the black.
That's the conversation.
Well, right. There's a lot of conversations regarding that component of our health and safety system, whether the fines are justifiable, whether the deterrence, like the max fine for an employer now is $2 million.
Will you ever see that, though?
Per charge? No, you'll never see that. No. You'll never see that.
Because there's ways around it.
Well,
the courts won't fine you more than you are, more than they determine you are likely able to pay.
The idea is that, the fine isn't supposed to close the doors and have 100 people on the unemployment line.
Teach you a lesson.
It's a significant general deterrent, right? So if you're a small company, they look at the size of your company, they look at the financials, and they give you a deterrent specific to you.
So the big players know this.
No, it's not even just the big players.
Well, look,
It's the way the courts are set. It's the way the fine structures are set. So if I'm a bigger player, I'm going to get a bigger fine because I actually have a bigger payroll or bigger financial aspects.
They won't close.
It's a significant...
And the court
thing.
still
It's
runs
not
on
a-
precedence
yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
so, but
Significant general
deterrence,
returns, yeah.
deterrence, Kev, is, and you know, I'll be the first to say this because I argued for creative sentencing the last time I was here.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned
creative
that.
sentencing in
Makes a lot of
Alberta
sense.
is phenomenal, and deferred prosecution agreements in the U.S. are even, you know, just as good as creative sentencing in Alberta. But there are companies here that have had multiple fatalities that still operate and still make a lot of money. And I'm not going to put their names out there on blast, but you'll have, you know, you could have a double fatality, and you look at the history of compliance for that one company, and you will see 20 Part 1 charges before that. You'll see maybe a Part 3 before that. You have companies that are continuously either involved in, a part of, or responsible for workplace fatalities that continue to operate like nothing happened. So where's the general deterrent there? That's that, and that is my only qualm. Look, the Ministry of Labor does the best that they can do within the parameters that they can do them. I have a lot of respect for, you know, their role, because everybody in this room did that role, right? We saw the fatalities, we saw the critical injuries, we saw, you know, the coroner's inquests
And the court cases.
and the court cases we were involved in. So I got a lot of respect for it. But at the end of the day, really, this is, you know, it's going to come from people above the Ministry of Labor and the legal system itself. I mean, even the fine going to the municipality is wild to me. So if you get fined in Toronto, if a company gets fined in Toronto and they get $50,000 in fines, those fines are paid to the municipality with a victim surcharge fee. So that money itself is not going to go to an organization like Threads of Life. It's not going to go to compensation boards. It's going to go to the municipality. So Toronto, think of how much money Toronto makes on Part 1,
Yeah,
Part 3
but then the
prosecutions.
next thing is, how does that municipality collect that money? If you got these companies that open and close and change names and they're shell companies and the shenanigans, oh, it's been happening since God knows when, right? But there's a lot of shenanigans that are played in our industry in terms of fines, in terms of collecting, in terms of what they say and what it actually is. Right, so yeah, we laid $400,000 in fines for this company for this fatality. Okay, great. Who's collecting that money? Did you collect that money?
But even so, who cares? Because it doesn't go back into the safety system. That's the point that I'm...
Yeah, you're right. It should be collected and it should go back in the safety system to continue.
But where does the actual victim surcharge go?
I don't know.
A fun.
It's been a while since I've had
Yeah,
some.
so the victim
so.
surcharge goes into
How long?
into a fund
Long time since I've
to pay
know,
Since you got a
to
ticket?
help assist victims of
no, not
crime.
Ministry of Labor, speeding ticket. Sorry.
Generally, it's crime. Generally, it's
Yeah,
crime.
so it's victims of crime, and that gets held within the province. It's a fund for
But it's
them.
dispersed. Is it actually?
I would be curious to see what their percentage of collection.
That's what
That's where I
I'm
would start
curious. Like government is notorious for money coming in, and we don't know where it goes.
The municipal government and the Ontario government, when a fine gets levied, you know, the Ontario government in the Ministry of Labor anyway, so the Ministry of Attorney General, lawyer who's seconded to the Ministry of Labor for whatever reason, that individual handles the case. Let's just say they get a conviction of $50,000. You know how much money it costs for that lawyer and that lawyer's team of
6 figures.
to prosecute that case, then the court time, right, in the provincial court, then the inspector time. So it's costing a lot of money for the Ontario government to prosecute these cases with fine amounts only going back to the municipality. I'm not saying that the government of Ontario should be getting that money, but in Alberta, a lot of that fine money, when you agree to creative sentencing, a lot of that fine money goes back into the associations. It'll go into the ACSA, or it'll go into a group that handles worker safety, or
Be
they'll
put back into programs.
It can be
right?
put back into
You might
programs.
have to sponsor a program. So
Yeah.
you're going to build something, you're going to sponsor that, you're going to fund that, but that
These are
program
good ideas.
becomes available
Great
for
ideas.
everybody, right?
Yeah.
And to John's point, I mean, we should be looking at other methodologies here in Ontario too when it comes to sentencing, right? Because there needs to be some component there that is beneficial, right? Other than here's just a financial penalty. Okay, well, thanks for the financial penalty, right?
Right.
But what did that do for the public good?
Yeah. I could tell you, for me, I probably issued a lot more orders for retraining than I did issuing out tickets, with the mindset that
That's better though.
Yes,
Right.
Exactly.
Right?
I would
Because you're going to pay to have that training done.
Yeah.
And even if you learn,
Did I miss something?
No.
even
If
if you learn something, you were better off
why I
than
think it's
you were
better,
better off
of
than you were
course.
yesterday.
It's a proactive investment.
Because at the end of the day, right, that $235 ticket for not wearing a hard hat is a slap on the wrist, and then somebody telling you shame on you, but nobody educated you. And so this is the idea is, issuing orders for retraining, and again, like I said, you are still spending money, you're still spending time, but you're taking away from
But
work
you're
that you're not
learning
making.
it.
But you're
Whether
learning.
that's one lesson
That's
or
right.
several.
This is why
you're
we're on the
learning.
private side.
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
but
It's why we're on the private side, so that we can be proactive in doing all of this. So Vince issuing orders, and I worked with Vince a lot. We worked very closely. We were in the same office. We lived in the same area. So, working with Vince a lot, he'd issue an order for retraining at the same time that I'd issue a summons to appear. And, at the minute, the rule was if you were going to provide the names of a consultant, you had to provide 3 different consultants, right? So if I was a Ministry of Labor inspector and I said, hey, you guys have to go get retrained in working at heights, I would say, okay, well, here's Cobalt Safety's number, and here's the IHSA's contact, and here's XYZ Consulting, and I would give you 3 different consultants that you could choose to go get trained from, but
Or choose your own.
or
Or
choose
a lot
your
of times,
own,
a lot of times, you're not providing it unless they ask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, to the point of fines and training and stuff, you got to take it from your own perspective too. You drive a vehicle, you're aware of what the laws are, right?
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Manny, I'm going to step out for a second.
Yeah.
The standard ones, right? And then as an inspector, you find someone in contravention of the law. And just like a police officer catches you running a stop sign, you roll it. It wasn't your best stop. At that moment, that inspector or that police officer has, he can give you a warning, and he can...
Is at their discretion.
Sure, up to their discretion. But I know personally, I've gotten a ticket for rolling a stop sign, and I guarantee you, after I got that ticket, it'd be months before I roll another stop sign. I'm extremely
But you
cautious.
will go back to it.
Sure,
Human
you will
behavior.
do. Human nature, there always has to be those checks and balances. Like a province without enforcement, like I don't even know what that would look like. It would, I guess, compare it to like a third world country where there's no enforcement.
It was funny when the mobile laws came into effect here in Canada, where I always felt that original fine was just ridiculous. It was like $165, no demerit points. And I remember the same time that it happened, I was visiting Italy, and I was asking a cabbie, why is nobody on the phone? And he goes, because it's a €1,500 ticket and you lose your license. if
Yeah,
you're
that's
caught
a
with
strong
it.
deterrent.
And I'm like, that's a pretty good deterrent not to use the mobile. And I was cautious, like I was literally watching nobody on their phones. But then now I think it's 3 demerit points and it's up to 1,000 or something like that. So it's gotten up there, but people still do
People
it.
still do it. And again, I think there's a lot of ingredients that go into our health and safety system in Ontario. Whether it's the enforcement component or whether it's the training component or whether it's the courts, the fines and all that stuff. All these different ingredients and it helps our system function.
Well, it's enlightening that you guys brought that up earlier, where you're basically saying that certain things are done a certain way to still keep that business in line. And it kind of goes back to the OBC, where my first year of construction, an older tradesperson taught me that the OBC is like a full glass of water on the edge of a table. That's the OBC. There's a risk that you can build it a certain way and it may fall over, it may break, it may whatever. But if you put that glass in the center of the table, there's a very good chance that it will not fall over.
Right.
But they're doing that on purpose, because if we actually had to build stricter and be safer, you would have far fewer people building legally. Is that not the case? So then you start shutting down the industry by keeping it open, by kind of keeping a blanket.
There has to be balance.
Okayness.
You have balance.
There has to be a
Has
balance.
to be a balance,
If it's too much enforcement, companies can't move. If it's too less amount of enforcement, then people are going to take advantage.
Why can't it be an enforcement with an education? So it's like you get, okay, for lack of a better word, caught. you go to school. Like when I was a kid, a teenager, sure, I drove a little heavy on the pedal. That's just normal. That's how I was, right? I got to the point where I almost lost my license and 9 demerit points. And guess what? I'm in the weekend class being taught how to drive safer, and I'm spending my entire afternoon in this class to learn how to drive safer because of my risk of losing my license. Right?
I think what they expect is that the education comes before the charges, right? This is,
but that's not what the industry's doing. We're not doing that.
No.
Agreed. But what the ministry expects is that, you're training this person on using that circular saw or using that drill or whatever it is before they actually use it. So
it's reactive.
Well, I will say now that the Ministry of Labor, from my experience being in Toronto, was 95% reactive. I mean, and to your point, to Vince's point, the expectation is that you're going to have the training beforehand, right, so that the ministry is not there.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Issuing charges.
Yeah.
My point is this, right? It's like I said on last time on your show, right? I incorporate navigating the Act and the regs into training classes that I teach because that is the very basic understand. If I can tell you as a supervisor, which, you have to have knowledge of the Act and the regs that apply to the work in Ontario for you to be deemed competent, but that's the very basic. If I can teach you how to navigate the Act and the regs, you can do it yourself. That's where your proactivity can come from, because before you do something, you're either going to look and say, ooh, this is risky, but it's quicker, I'm going to do it anyway, or hang on, let me see what the Act or the regs say about it, because that's the minimum requirements, right? So
I think nowadays, like if you look at what we do now, all of us here are educators. So
right.
we look at it and say, how do we come out and help educate so you don't have to have that Ministry of Labor experience? So you're not running into those inspectors. I do a lot of supervisor training myself. I've been training for almost 10 and a half years on one particular course called Supervisor Due Diligence. And this particular course is just for supervisors, and it teaches them what I call the game of safety, right? Which is boots and suits. And if you remember boots and suits, it'll always help you because boots is what you're really doing out there. You're out there working, put your hard hat on, tie off. And suits is the game the ministry plays. They're playing the game of law. But if you don't actually understand how to do this properly, we run into the situation. So I think better explaining safety, better understanding what it is, why it is, and how it is, that we're all here to keep people protected and make money. Like it's
nobody
not
wants to talk about it though. Nobody wants to do it until it's a reactive process.
There are people who are very good. Look, I think that inspectors, ex-inspectors, we have an advantage in the safety industry just because we've seen the worst of the worst, but also we were involved in application of the law, right? So an application of the law is huge, right? So I like to consider people. I tell people all the time, I'm much better with operational safety than if you sat me at a desk and told me to build a policy, right? I'm much better at actively applying principles in the field. I build better safety people than I do policies, right? I mentor people to be incredible safety professionals, and I'm very proud of that.
But you need the environment.
But right, you need the environment. But there are people in the private industry that are phenomenal at what they do. I just think that, when Kevin teaches a supervisor due diligence course, you're learning it from somebody who's charged supervisors successfully. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So and that's the point that I'm trying to make. If Vince, as the National Director of Safety, goes onto a job site for Prodigy, whether it's here or in BC or, in the U.S., because of Vince's experience in enforcing the law, you can pick up a copy of the law in WorkSafe BC and navigate just as quickly as any other inspector in BC could. So I think that we have, we approach it differently, but there are good players in the game, and I think that when you say, you made the mention that why don't people want to talk about it, I think that the best players in the game, the biggest players in the game, so you're talking about the GIPs, you're talking about, WSP as an engineering consultant, you're talking about PCL or Ellis Don, they invest millions and tens of millions of dollars into safety teams. They are talking about it. I think where it's not being talked about is
the bottom
Joe's Plumbing or, Canadia Roofing or something like that.
And that comes back to the original point of this gap between companies. Okay, so most of the gentlemen at this table deal with companies that are 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll probably even say 7, 8, 9. And it's a great environment working for these multi-million-dollar companies. Everyone has a truck. Everyone does safety. Everyone has all this nice PPE, and it's great. But that only really deals with the top 30% of the companies in this province.
If 30.
Yeah. Let's go and I think this is where like my company and our approach has a little bit more of a niche group, because we're dealing with companies that are ones that come up to us and say, hey, how do I become a 6? How do I become a 7? Oh, hey, this is a lifestyle choice. You want to go from 1 to 7? This is a commitment. This is like going to the gym. You just came up to me and said you want to lose 150 pounds, right? And these companies, which make up a majority of the construction companies, which are companies, in my opinion, that are less than a 5 on the scale rating. Yeah. And we measure that by compliance. We measure that by contraventions. We measure that by management attitude, management involvement. Right? You get these companies, which makes up a majority of them, where safety, in my opinion, just based on what I viewed, what my clients, the job sites they're on, even with our Instagram page, the number of pictures and videos that, workers send to us from their site and say, hey, Phil, is this fucking safe? Hey, Phil, look at these fuckers not tied off. Or, hey, look at this situation. It definitely gives you a different perspective on safety and how safety is being done, right? John named all these companies, but how about ABC Roofing? How about Joe's masonry company?
Are the majority of them doing their toolbox talk at the start of the day, but everyone's treating it as if you're on a plane and
toolbox
you're not paying
talk.
attention to any kind
That'd
of...
be great if they did, actually.
I think there's a lack of knowledge, willingness, and understanding about health and safety in these bottom 50% of the companies out there. I think it's beneficial to a lot of these companies to fly under the radar, and that's
a lot of them just don't know. Like I remember,
I would agree.
I remember back in the day when a company would open up and register with WSIB or WBC at the time, or WCB, whatever at the time. They would hold workshops at the IHSA or the CSAO at the time.
Miss the CSAO.
And be somewhat educated. We would have inspectors going in there and talk about legislation and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, and so on and so forth. I don't think that happens anymore. Right now, I think they just provide the small contractor toolkit online, and here you go. It's right here. Look at it. But there's no education. Right, it's just whatever you can find on the internet and do your own research. Whereas with the workshops, you at least went face to face with an individual, and we can explain to you firsthand, based on our experience and our knowledge, what you need to do. And they don't do that anymore.
No, the small businesses like Instagram, for example. I enjoy Instagram. I enjoy looking at the videos and stuff. And a lot of your followers, they follow us. And if their posts are any indication of the safety that they do, they need a lot of work. We got masonry companies posting a bunch of guys 3 levels high on the scaffold with no guardrails, nobody tied off. You got drywall companies and stucco companies posting the same garbage, not tied off and this and that. If Instagram is any indication of what's happening in that bottom 50%,
I agree with you.
It's a shit show.
It's a choice, and safety is a conscious choice, and it's a lifestyle choice.
Sure, but it costs money.
And so the point that I was going to make is that you have, if your organization has safety as a core value, right? And I don't mean safety in the technical aspects, the act and the regs and the policies and the toolbox talks and all that other shit. If your core value of safety, which is fundamentally about the intrinsic value of a worker's life, of a human being life, if that's one of your organization's core values, whether you have 20 people or 2,000 people or 20,000 people, you're going to invest in that, right? And I think that these larger organizations, they have the financial ability to invest in that. Whereas these smaller organizations, they may not have the financial ability to invest in that, but financial ability shouldn't be the. But it shouldn't be the bar. It's safety is when you say that I'm gonna, work safely, right? And to Phil's point about the Instagram pages, but when you say I'm going to work safely, right? You're not saying for this to be effective, you're not saying I'm going to work safely so that the government doesn't come and get me. You're going to say I'm going to work safely so that every single person on this job site and in my company goes home to the people that love them. And if you make that commitment right off the bat, you could start with zero. You could create your own company. You could, start a roofing company, start a masonry company, start a concrete company, whatever you want to do. If you walk through that door with the understanding and the core value that I'm going to care about the wellness and safety of everybody that comes into my fold, you're in the right foot. You're in the right place. I think that, and look, coming from construction, you and I both, and Kev, you and I both, we get into this industry because there's a lot of money to be made. Let's put that on the table, right? Number two, it's cool to create. I get to create something and see something that wasn't there before, right? Whether it's a building or a roadway or a bridge. All of that as a motivating factor is why people turn to construction. But as a business owner, if you are thinking about starting your own business, if you're a listener and you're thinking, hey, you know what, I'm an electrician, I've been working for this guy for this amount of time, I think I'm going to go start my own business. The first foot you put through that door should be the core value of keeping people safe. And if that's your first value, everything you do after that point, everything you do for the remainder of your career as a business owner will be for the right reasons. But the minute you try and hide something, or you say safety costs too much money, or I'm not going to pay Phil to come in.
Am I fair to say that safety equals profits?
Safety equals money retained from profits.
I sum it up like this. Safety is all about respect. You leave your family to come help make me profits, ones and zeros. So if I respect that you're giving up your time to help me make money, then respect from me to you would provide you a safe workplace.
Yes.
But it's also self-respect too, right? As a worker, you're leaving your family to come make money. You need to respond and return back to those people. So if something's not safe, don't do it. Right? And it's just a simple thought process, right? Safety is about respect. And to John's point, he summed it up great, right? Hey, if I just start off with I respect people that come and work for me and help me make money, right? It's just ones and zeros. My job is to make sure you go home because I need you back tomorrow anyways, because it's hard to replace workers.
Sure.
And self-respect from a worker's perspective is, why am I taking a risk to put a drywall screw in, which could actually affect my life or my family's life? So self-respect means, no, I'm not going to do something because it's not safe. I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I think those are basic principles.
Yeah. You have successful businesses where their adage is, our businesses are people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've heard it. We've seen it.
Sure. And you can't have that unless you protect your guys. You educate your employees, and you provide them a healthy and safe working environment. Without that, then then all you do care about is money. It's not about your workers.
But see, that's where my mindset is, that if you got a healthy and safe workforce,
Right.
then you have a productive, profitable business.
Yep.
In my mind, you cannot be an industry leader at anything unless safety is your core value. You could do the most work out of every electrical company in this province. If safety, and I keep using electrical, but if safety is not built into the fabric of your DNA as an organization, you're not a leader. I will not look at you as a leader. You may be the best, the best bridge building company in the country, but you won't last, and you're not a leader. So if an organization wants to be an industry leader or stand out within the industry, because look, a small civil company is not going to compete with Dufferin Construction, right? But that doesn't mean that the small civil company can't be an industry leader in their own respect, right? If you want to be an industry leader, lead from the vantage point of caring about people. If you are a small company just starting out, or if you're a massive company that's undergoing growth spurts, start with the value of the human beings in your care.
Yeah, so it's people first, safety always.
Can I ask you guys, because in all my years of construction, I would say the most extreme situation that I ever had was a window installer that sliced his shin from one of the tabs coming off of a large unit and sliced it to the bone, right? So, and obviously it was hospital stitches, that whole deal, right? But that was the extreme of my situation. I've never been to the extreme of what you guys have seen. But I'm really curious to get your insight on what's the cause and effect of the rest of the workforce after a fatality or a critical illness.
There's no such thing as one victim.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to get at, because there is a cause and effect of that, the rest of the workforce and the individual, or even the people that find the individual and what that does to their mental state.
And I can tell you, typically construction fatalities are traumatic.
Yeah.
They're traumatic. It's not,
Doesn't matter how tough a tradesperson you might think you are, man or woman, it's going to affect you that in a way that you may never have been affected in your lifetime. Right?
I've never seen anybody.
It affects
be okay.
us. Right?
Yeah,
We're showing up to these things. We're showing up to the accident. We're showing up to the people there. It affects everybody. There's no such thing as not being affected by a fatality.
The last fatality that I investigated, every time I closed my eyes for probably about 4 days, 4 nights, that's all I pictured. And
even to this day, I mean, there's times where, I tell the story of my first fatality in a lot of training courses. Kevin and I just did a course together for the Ontario Road Builders Association Road Building Academy, right? And that story is part of my introduction to why safety matters, right? Still to this day, if, I see something, like Phil and I were driving over here together, and Phil points out a bunch of roofers not tied off, my mind immediately goes back to my mind immediately went back to the roofer who fell 3 stories and hit his head so hard he was killed instantly, that I responded to. So those incidents, they stay with us and they affect us. And to your point, when something happens in the construction industry where somebody is killed, everybody connected to that individual, whether you were on site, whether you were related to them, whether you were on a different site, but this is somebody that you worked with all the time, you're never going to be the same. No. This is you got to remember, this is final. When somebody and I am a staunch proponent of the idea that nobody deserves to go to work and be hurt or killed trying to earn a living for their families. So when somebody goes to work and gets killed, that's final. That's the end of the story for that person. It will. Everybody around you will be deeply affected, and I don't think there's anybody in this room who can say anything different to that.
And to your point, that's the end of that person's story, but the start of many other people's story.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah. And other people will have to carry that burden. Their families carry that burden. Like we've all have stories where we've know what the outcome of these things are. It's probably why we're so passionate about trying not to have the accident. Like, safety is a calling because you're here to stop that from happening. And for the fellows at this table, we've all seen the worst outcome. I'm sorry, I would not put some of the stuff I've seen on my worst enemies, because it's devastating. Not just devastating to the person that got hurt or killed, it's devastating to everybody that's there involved, including the industry itself. It's not good, right? So.
Yeah, there's definitely some bad actors out there. And, some of these corporations try their best. And then you got corporations that just don't give a shit. They don't. They don't care about humans. They don't care about...
Well, they know they can get away with.
That's what it comes down to. Like, you take the Metron case, and that was the case where we had a quadruple fatality on Christmas Eve, and one supervisor I ended up putting that supervisor in jail for 3.5 years. I think they deserved it. I think they deserved a lot worse. Right? I think that supervisor should have gone to jail for 10 years. I think the owner of that company should have gone to jail.
And that was under, just to be very clear, right, when Phil says he put the supervisor in jail, was so the Ministry of Labor Inspector has authority under the Provincial Offences Act to enforce the OHSA and the regulations that apply to the work. So, but the Westray disaster in PEI forced amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada under Bill C-45 that added a provision in Section 217.1 of the Criminal Code that allowed for the Crown to pursue criminal negligence charges. That was the first. So the Metron case, that supervisor who did go to jail for that for 3.5 years for the negligence, that was after all of the provincial charges had gone through, and there was an appeal, and they ended up getting $750,000 fine to the organization themselves. And then the individual went to jail, because what will happen is the police will conduct an investigation almost kind of parallel, and they'll piggyback off of each other. So if the police want to pursue, I shouldn't just say the police, but if they want to pursue criminal charges, what they'll do is they'll piggyback off of the Ministry of Labor's investigation,
What happened?
What happened? Go back and forth.
What happened with the Metron case is that they ended up serving a friendly warrant on the Ministry of Labor and collecting the investigation. Right, because the Ministry of Labor has more power than the police when it comes to investigations and stuff like that. But like looking at the Metron case and looking at the type of people that run Metron, this is a company that's a zero. This is a company that does not pay for training. This is a company that selects a workforce that's illegal, vulnerable, collects their passports.
So it was just a matter of time.
Unfortunately,
like this was going to happen.
With companies like this, the odds and the risks that you take are a lot greater, right? A lot of companies have operated this way for 10 years and haven't had any issues. But
that's just luck.
Yeah.
It's mindset, though, too. I mean, there's been so that very first fatality that I investigated, right? The deceased's brother was a laborer on that crew, and the deceased's father was the foreman on that crew. So this individual, was buried alive in front of his brother and his father. But that old school, especially European mentality, 2 months later, I found that exact same crew after the fatality had occurred in a trench with no shoring at a different job site location. That's what added to their eventual conviction. But it's a mindset. I said it when I was here the first time. It's a habit, and the habit is the hardest thing to break. So, even though I can tell you that everybody's life will change after a fatality, you're still going to put your shoes on the same way. You're still going to wake up in the morning, and the right sock's going to go on before the left sock, and the right shoe's going to go on before the left shoe, and you're going to jump back into what you were doing before. Just seeing that exact same crew in a trench with no shoring 2 months after the fatality of not only one of their workers but one of their relatives, that was eye-opening for me. Sure. And I will tell you that because I investigated that one as well. I think I even called you that day and said, Vince, what do I, should I jump in here? Should I hand this off to somebody else just to kind of get some advice? But it's that habit. You have to break that habit loop. There's a book that I would encourage anybody to read called The Habit Loop by Charles Duhigg, and it is a phenomenal book. But it goes into depths, how hard habits are to break, how easy they are to form, and perfect example was that. Fatality happens, July 24th. By the end of September, I'm on another one of their job sites, and they're doing the exact same thing. Not because they didn't care that happened, but this is what they've done for so long. Yeah. You have to thread, to make real change. If you are an established organization looking to improve your safety, this is where you'll give consultants like S1 or Cobalt a call to be able to, or HSE Elements, or whatever it is going to be. You're going to loop them in to help you change that that modus operandi that you've been working under for all this time. And that's even harder than just starting out. If you're just starting out, when you involve them, it's way better because you're going to start on the right foot. But if you are an organization looking to change, it is going to be a painful change. But if change isn't painful, then it's not worth doing, right?
Again, and to that point, I think it's easier for a company that's a 7 to go, it's harder for a company that's a 7 to go to an 8 than it is a company that's a 0 or a 1 to go to a 5 or a 6. Yeah. Right?
It's called the Ferreira scale, by the way.
Yeah, this is totally just based on my experience. I was going to say, can
I get a copy of that?
But listen, to know where you put them. Here's the balance. Metron is 0, and everybody else is a, But are there a lot of companies like Metron? Yes. They don't have the training.
You got to figure out what their motivation is, right? I mean, if it's
I go back to cash, profits. I'm sorry, it is.
So, listen, I can tell you.
Well, safety is the most expensive thing you'll never do.
I had an experience where I came across a roofer, and obviously I think there were 4 or 5 of them up, 4 of them up on the roof, and had them come down. And none of them were tied off, and 3 younger gentlemen and an older guy, and so obviously you kind of gravitate to the older individual thinking that it's his company or whatever it is, and so you gather his identification and you're writing it down and the company information, and then the next individual you're getting his information and you see that the last name's the same, and then the next guy, his last name's the same, and I'm like, these boys, they're your kids? He goes, yeah. I said, you have your sons up on the roof not tied off. And this is where, I respectfully would pull him aside because I was going to give him crap, not in front of his boys, but I laid into him. I said, how do you go and have that conversation with your wife when one of your sons falls off that roof? Right?
There's no way to have that conversation.
That's right. Right? How do you live with that guilt afterwards? It's impossible. For what? Because you think that you're going to finish that roof a little bit quicker and make a little bit more money? That's worth your kid's life? So
I think for us as safety professionals, it's mind-boggling some of the shit that we see.
Yeah.
Right? But as owners of companies, and you try to put yourself in the position of these owners or these workers, and it's like, why did you take that risk? Why are you doing this unnecessarily? Like, why wouldn't you just buy the equipment? And these are some of the things that we look at because we've seen the end results of companies not caring.
if you don't do it, yeah.
Right? We've seen that.
You got to look at the motivation behind these companies.
Sometimes
like you don't know the financial requirements that are going on between that family. Sure. Maybe that they're a mortgage payment away from losing something. You know what I'm saying?
But as an owner of a company, you get into the business of roofing or bricklaying. You have to understand that there's an associated cost with safety to your business. And a lot of these companies that are 5 and below, ABC Roofing, for example, why are they picking up homeless guys and putting them on roofs to scrape shingles? What's the benefit there?
Profit.
What's the benefit of not buying 10 harnesses? What's the benefit of not taking your entire workforce of 5 to 10 workers and sending them to a full day of training, or 2 or 3 or 4? What is the benefit there?
You said it. Kevin said it best. Safety is the most important thing that you'll never do. Right?
It's also the most expensive, right?
Most expensive thing that
if you don't do it, you're eventually going to pay lawyers hundreds of dollars an hour. You're going to pay guys like us to show up and do this stuff. You're going to get your charges, and you're going to lose all your profits, and then you got to go back and do it again.
But that's the enforcement is in place.
If the enforcement's there, but I see a lot of people choosing convenience versus consequence. I'm just here for a second. I think the most common thing I've ever heard is I was just on the roof for a second. I'm just going to be over here for a second.
Don't know. It's just a second.
That convenience versus the consequence is a risk. We do it, drive down the road. Somebody's on their phone. I'm just on the phone for a second while I'm driving at 100K. That's convenience versus consequence. That's that ability to take risk. And it's to John's point of habit. Hey, if I took this risk 45 times and nothing's ever happened, then 46 should be okay, right?
Yeah, this game is a lot of risk and probability too. And different types of workers in the workforce. Some are more prepared to take bigger risks.
Language an excuse?
Language is a barrier.
Sure. Right? I think language is in the top 3 biggest issues that face workers and employers in this province.
Yeah, there's 180 spoken languages in Ontario.
99% of the training in this province is done in English. A majority of the training done by employers, such as a review of the health and safety policy and program, is done in English.
The Green Book's in English. There's no Portuguese version.
No, right? But you can't do translations of laws.
There's no French version either. So let's be honest.
Most of the in my time as an inspector in the city of Toronto, I will tell you that most of the roofing companies were staffed by people of Asian descent. So, I'm looking up at a roof and all 5 people on that roof not tied off speak Cantonese. How am I getting the message across to them in the most effective way? And look, I don't think that that's necessarily the inspector's job to do.
It isn't.
I think that that's the government's job to do. But to Vince's point, when you started a small company before and you registered with the WSIB, you went through a process where somebody came in and spoke to you about the basic minimum requirements that you have to do by law. And if that's not happening anymore, and now you're getting a little handbook, look. I cannot tell you how many handbooks I've gotten in my life that I've thrown in the back seat and never looked at before in my life. So language is definitely a concern with, 180 spoken languages in Ontario alone. But there should be more outreach. I know that there are many different consultants that will speak many different languages. I know for a fact, Phil speaks a few, and I know Kevin has staff on hand that will speak a few.
We train in complete Spanish. All our courses are complete Spanish.
So, right? But and again, that is the marker of an organization that cares. That's the marker of a good organization that will understand and realize, hey, hang on a second, 60% of my workforce is Portuguese. And all of my documents are in English. The marker of a good organization is to say, I'm going to translate these documents into Portuguese, and I'm going to have a Portuguese native speaker explain what all of this is and be able to communicate with them. I speak Italian, right? So growing up in heavy civil, you know, I grew up speaking Italian, but growing up in heavy civil in my time, everybody was Italian. When I got to the Ministry of Labor, you know, I would get calls from other, you know, English-speaking, you know, only English-speaking inspectors that would say, you know, I can't talk to this guy. And I'd drive over, and sure enough, I'd be speaking Italian to the guy.
Yeah,
and the best thing is that 9 out of 10 times, they do speak English. They just didn't want to talk to you. So
Exactly. Well, you know,
They play
workers
that
have a
card.
right to know. We hear that all the time, a right to know. But it should be a right to know in language they understand.
right.
Right? Because understanding is actually probably a hazard. A lot of people just don't understand what they're supposed to do.
So who's the responsibility? It's falling on the employer.
On the employer.
It can't fall on the government.
It can't fall
Have you
on the
ever read
government.
Section 25
No.
of the Act? Section 25 is the longest section in that Act, and that discusses employer responsibilities. It's more than the constructor. It's more than a licensee. It's more than an owner. It's more than a supervisor. It's more than a worker. The onus is on the employer. Now, in construction, the same onus that is on the employer would be on the constructor as well. But in every other industry, the onus is on the employer. So when it's 25-2H, which is our general duty clause, which every law has a general duty clause,
Hamburger helper.
you know, it's the hamburger. Kevin calls it the hamburger helper.
That's how I
section,
remember
but
2022.
That's
So I got my
that's
own
how do
scale.
we-
You got your own terms.
That's how we enforced it, right? So it was the catch-all
Section
clause. So I use the good technical term, the general duty clause, and I'm flanked by 3 former colleagues that have things to say about it. But 25-2H says that the employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of the worker. That's, I don't know how much more blanket statement you can get, right? That is a heavy obligation.
You're bringing in a workforce that doesn't speak English, then you should
It's
be taking
your
the
obligation.
effort to
Actually,
actually
safety is about respect.
And what's
Exactly.
reasonable, right? And the key word in that section is reasonable. And reasonable will be determined through court precedent that's gone before it. So
Yeah.
if you're bringing in workers that, don't speak the language, let's just say, although, you have a majority of workers that speak Spanish, right? And you're bringing them in and you're providing all the training in English, the court will look at you and say, do you think it was reasonable that you provided all that
not just
training
that,
in English?
the requirements for health and safety information to be communicated in a language that the workers understand.
Right.
Right? I think the top 3 challenges that are facing health and safety in this province, number 1, I think it's a lack of enforcement. Okay? When we were there,
That's strictly connected to a lack of inspectors.
no, not necessarily.
Really?
I think it's the inspectorate has changed. I've been there when I joined. I think I was 23 years old. I was one of the few Portuguese inspectors, and I speak Portuguese. I speak some Spanish. I speak some Italian, and I was placed on a lot of special teams and got to deal with a lot of special issues. I guess it's. A lot of let me adjust this thing.
There's no training course for that. We need a course.
Sure, I missed that. But I think the biggest challenges right now definitely the lack of enforcement, the lack of targeted enforcement, the lack of confident inspectors. There's a lot of ingredients that go into good enforcement.
So it's a good grocery list that you're sharing, but what's the cause and effect of that? So if we increased all of those things, what would we see?
I think we'd see companies taking less chances, less risks. I think if there was more proactive inspections, that employers would have more ability or opportunity to be educated. And I think that if there is a strong deterrent and a strong presence, then companies are not as inclined to take as many chances with workers' lives.
Yeah.
I agree with that sentiment, but what I think when the cat's away, the mouse will play. It's a common saying, right? But the reality is this: I would like to see it be a core value commitment from people, right? I don't think that anybody should be willing to have somebody hurt or killed to make a buck. And if you
But they'll roll the dice, John.
right,
There's
but
companies that roll that dice all the time.
They do roll that
We saw
dice.
a picture of on Keel and Wilson, a lineup of individuals waiting to get jobs. You think by today that nobody's picked those guys up?
No, and I see what you're saying, right? So enforcement does have its place, right? I am on the side of education, proactivity, because
often,
when
John?
you can't. So here's the thing, right? Go back to Machiavelli, right? The question of whether it's better to be feared or loved.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody can answer that question in its entirety, because in different applications and different settings, it's better to be one or the other. I would say in safety, fall right in the middle, right? Because if you're only complying, if you're only doing safety because you're scared of getting pinched, you're not doing it for the right reasons anyway, and you're going to cut corners somewhere where they can't see you. So I think
But I get the industry is probably only doing it for that reason.
some people are. I mean,
Majority.
there are a lot of companies out there, like the bigger ones that I mentioned, that do it because they genuinely care. I think that you're going to see a lot of the smaller companies that do it because they're scared of being enforced upon. But again, if you are look, everybody has to make money. I get that, right? We all have to make money. But if you go into it with the idea that you're going to make money at the expense of another human being, you shouldn't be in business at all.
But I think some of these owners and some of the clients that I pick up that are, again, on that scale, less than a 4, and they say, we need help. We know we need help. My first question is, why? Why do you think you need help?
We need help. They're saying that because they've already been pinched.
Either they
Maybe
got
sometimes.
pinched, or their WSIB rates are up,
Yeah.
or they got charged somewhere down the
So
line,
it's motivated help
or again, someone got injured and they've had a change of heart,
for a period of time.
right? But they do come to us and say, hey, listen, Phil, we need help.
Well,
And
I mean, some of it also has to do with, they want to be able to price that job, right?
sure.
So now I need that accreditation because it's a caveat of the requirement to put us on that bidders list and stuff like that. So
Like ISO and
And
core.
I want to add something to that, because there's a lot of people that actually just want to do the right thing. There's all kinds of people that want to do the right thing. They just don't know what it is.
Those are my favorite people.
But they're like, hey, I need help. I know I need to do something. I just don't know what it is.
So where do they begin?
it's not always what the have-tos, it's how-tos.
Just
There's
like
a lot of
everything
missing
else, you got to
how-tos. Make a
subcontract
phone
out the
call.
things that you don't understand or you can't do.
You got to backfill your weaknesses, right? Good leaders backfill their weaknesses. So as a safety leader in an organization, right, I can tell you what the law says right away. I write very well, but I don't put a policy together. If you give me the entire time to put a policy together, it's going to jump back and forth. It's going to be very much based on that law, because you have to jump back and forth between the law. That's how I've gone. So I backfill people around me that are more skilled in putting together formal documents or whatever. So within any organization, as a good leader, you backfill your weak points, because you're not going to be able to control everything, right? I have to backfill my weak points to present a better, safer, more efficient product. My product is safety, right? Kevin's product is safety. Vince's product is safety. To present a better product, backfill your weak points.
What's my product?
Hey, no,
Listen,
you
but-
get what I'm saying.
But let's
Making
But
categories.
backfill,
Instagram.
on the social media.
backfill your weaknesses. Any good leader in any job, in any organization, backfills their weaknesses. If you are a giant company and you have a giant safety team, but you're not finding that your health and safety team is doing inspections appropriately, right? Or they're using checklists. I hate checklists. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I hate checklists. My staff do it
Doesn't
like a
stick.
field visit, right?
Yeah.
But if you find you're a big organization, you find that your health and safety staff, are just checking boxes, and you want to change that, backfill that weakness. You're going to call a Kevin, you're going to call a Phil, and you're going to say, okay, me and you, we're going to spend a day together. We're going to go to this site. And then me and you, another safety person, we're going to go to this site. And I'm going to teach you how to observe things outside of your checklist. I'm going to make you into an operationally functional safety investigator. Because there's so many things that people can do in safety. You can have one person that only builds policies, and that's what they're best at. You can have one person who is extremely well-versed in investigating critical incidents and fatalities. You can have one person that's a phenomenal trainer and a public speaker. There is many different facets of safety. For me, the most important facet of safety is operational safety. That's why going through an ISO 45001 process or a core process, for me, I know how to do it. I have a very capable team, right? But for me, it's just it's just part of getting that little sticker on the back of the trucks. Operational safety means taking it and putting it into action.
Boots on the ground.
Boots
Can
on
you
the
guys,
Boots on the ground.
like, you guys will educate small mom and pop
Absolutely.
and large corporations,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Can you guys give me, what's the cost?
It's
I know that there's a lot of variables and how many employees and all kinds of
I'm
stuff.
waiting to listen to Kevin say.
I was
gonna see what Phil said, yeah.
Whatever
I'm
Kevin
sure that a
says,
lot of
I'm
listeners are like,
15%
okay,
cheaper.
sure, we know safety costs, but you know, a death costs more.
Let me ask you a question, Manny. What's going to cost not to do it?
That's where it's
Right. What's
basically
going to
it.
cost not to do safety? Because I
But
can,
the
I can show you
workforce
those
doesn't know
costs,
that number until they experience that number.
but I can show that number to you. Like, just go look at court cases, look at lawyer fees, look at everything it's going to cost. It's going to cost somebody's life.
Yeah.
Right. So what's that value? What if it was your kid? What's that value?
Yeah.
Like when I send my kid to work in your company, I just want him back. I don't really care how much money you're making or not making. I just want them back. That's it. Right. So that goes back to what is the cost of not sending them back to me? Right. Because if your kid comes and works for me, don't you want him back? So that's all goes back to that safety is about respect thought process. And I think, and to some of the points that we've been talking about, what I've really noticed where safety makes a difference is in human oversight. Because human oversight, boots on the ground safety, where somebody's just on site and they're willing to just step into it and say, hey, we're not doing that. Workers are just trying to get the job done. They're just there trying to put money on and pay their mortgages, and companies are trying to make money. And having proper human oversight. Why do we have supervisors? Well, because you need somebody there to make sure the job gets done. Why do you have an ATC at Pearson International? Because if you just let pilots land, they'll all crash into each other. Proper human oversight, and safety is not, hey, I'm here to get you. Safety is about, hey, I'm going to here to interrupt that. Let's sort that out. We can immediately interrupt it. And that, all that's called the Hawthorne effect, believe it or not. It's actually a whole study that was done many years ago where when people are just kind of know there's somebody watching, they tend to just do the right thing. That's why there's security guards at the mall. They're not chasing you for $15 an hour, I'll tell you that. Right? But the thought process of good human oversight, good solid knowledge, right? And we're companies, to John's point, utilize guys like myself or Phil or anybody else at this table, is that we come from a very wide perspective on safety, right? Like, you know, you might be in a narrow band of your business, but we come from a very wide learning. And those wide learnings are able to come in and help your team foster. It's there to assist you there. I'm not there to replace your stuff. I'm there to help you. I'm there to be that source of expertise in the background. I'll tell you right now, if I'm not the guy that needs, if I don't know it, I'll be the first one to tell you I don't know it, and I will send you to the person that does, right? Or I'm going to go learn it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think, first off, you just have to factor it in. This is part of my business, and it's important to me. And safety starts at the top. It's never at the workers, never in the middle. It's at the top. But if you start at the top and you empower your frontline teams, your supervisors, to actually take safety seriously and do it as part of their operational thing, you probably don't even need safety people because they're doing safety just as part of the operations. So overall, I think, you know, having proper human oversight, having proper understanding, having proper information, and proper programs. There's a lot of safety programs that just don't function for people, and you have to have somebody who knows how to architect that system. Right? Because if you don't get the right system, you think you have it, and all of us here have seen some shiny binders in our careers, but they just never make it to the worker. So what's the point of the binder, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have a system that operationally gets down to that worker, provides them the safety at that boots level. That's the most important part. Safety is not an ivory tower job.
I tell people, so again, I'm not proactively in the consulting field. I was for a point of time. But I tell the people underneath me, my own staff, that I'm going to train you to be ready to walk through blood and brain matter and splatter, and I'm going to train you well enough so that you never have to.
Yep.
So that you make an impact in this organization so that we don't ever get to that point. And I think that everybody sitting at the table, and this is what I will say, there are very, very few safety people in industry that have seen what we have seen and have gone through what we have gone through, as just the four in this room, with the reality of safety. You get to a site and there's blood everywhere, right? You get to a site and the deceased is still there and not covered, right? So I train people.
We responded to failure all the time.
Right. We walked into failure. So I like to train my people to be prepared to respond to that, but be good enough to prevent that. Right? And that's how I approach my operational safety training. I want anybody underneath me to be just as good as I am. And you know, just as capable of, in to respond to an event. I want anybody underneath me to be just as good, or if not better than I am, and I'm going to build you up to the point where you are. And whatever happens to you after that, if you decide to stay, if you decide to go, I will have made you better, and I will have played a part in you making a difference in the industry. That's what means the most to me out of everything else, right? That's what means the most to me. I like to consider myself a people builder. I build, mini inspectors. The joke at work is I'm the inspector factory. You come to work for me, you're just
schooled.
You're just as good. You're just as good and just as capable.
Quick trial by
Labor
fire.
should be looking at your team. Got it.
Hey, listen,
That's where I go back to the privatization.
So this is what I'm
right?
going to say. This is what I will say to everybody here, because I know that my team's going to listen to this too. I will never, ever be the one to tell you not to pursue something you feel is better for you. So, and I don't think that anybody else should. If I'm going to try and hoard and gatekeep my people after, spending 5 years with them and making them into phenomenal safety professionals, then I'm doing a disservice to the industry as a whole, because I am potentially preventing them from saving somebody else's life. If they feel that it is the time to move on with their career, I will 100% support you, just as I would expect that if it was my time to move on from my career, that I would be supported in that regard too. As long as I'm leaving it better than I found it, people have the right to go and pursue everything else. I'm not a gatekeeper. I want to build you to be the best that you can be, and wherever you go and whatever you do with that information, I'm going to make the industry better as a result of building you.
Go out and make a difference.
And I think adding to John's too, there's a lot of different type of safety professionals. You can be in the industrial sector, you can be in the farming sector, you can be, different types of professionals, different types of attitude. And, even with safety after the last 5 years, I think there's a couple of different flavors of safety that are coming out. There's, I like to call it bubble wrap safety, where you have safety professionals that, we got to wrap you in bubble wrap to make sure you
Too
don't
much
get
going
hurt.
on? Helicoptering?
There is that type of mentality where, it's not safe, you might get hurt. The reality is construction is a dangerous job.
Yeah.
So is being a police officer, so is being a firefighter. These are dangerous jobs. What we have to learn to do, and what a lot of companies do well, is do these dangerous jobs carefully. Right? And that's the important part. You're doing this dangerous job, but are you doing it carefully? Are you following a game plan? And some of these safety professionals, I think they don't grasp, and I work with a lot of different safety teams, a lot of different individuals. I have my own team that I've trained. And, some of these individuals look at safety like, oh my God, I'm going to get a splinter. Well, yeah, you might get a splinter from handling a 2x4. Last summer, we had an administrative labor inspector on site dealing with 37 carpentry crews. And he turns around to me, and obviously falls and access and egress and railings, all of these things are top priority. He turns around to me and says, hey, Philip, maybe your guy should sand down these guardrails to get rid of the splinters. I looked at the guy. I started laughing. I'm serious. I go, I know you're serious. That's the funny shit. Right? Like, what do you say to that? Man, you're wasting my time. That's for sure. Right? So there is these different.
Too far. That's just.
You can appeal orders, eh? So just for anybody out, you get an order, you can appeal it, but it doesn't mean that you don't comply with it for the time it takes.
Oh, you didn't give me that
appeal.
order, thank God. Mm-hmm. But, there is different safety people. There is different companies out there. It's all a lot of different flavors. And I can only speak from my experiences. And like we talk about the Metron case and what kind of company that is. And I say that there's thousands of companies like this. I'm not joking. Let's say 8 months ago, I received a call from a company, Portuguese guys. I got your number.
Nothing to do with me.
I know, but that's the world I operate in, right? And I'm Portuguese, and a lot of people know me in the safety business as the Portuguese safety guy. But that being said, this was a company that was doing. Let's change it up a bit so that I don't put them on blast. Let's say they were doing masonry work. They had a worker that fell 12 feet, broke his leg. Critical injury, Ministry of Labor responds, hey, Philip, I got your number from this guy, told me you can help me out. Okay, I'll come meet you down on site. After the first 3 hours, I already had a really good idea of what the hell happened and what kind of company this is. And this is a company that has, been in business for the last 15, 20 years. I'll say at least 75% of their workforce is made up of illegal workers that get paid cash. They don't have any safety training. They don't have a health and safety policy and program. Right? I get onto this job site, which is an infill house, and this company is actually one of your followers, and they have a lot of Instagram posts about how awesome they are. But that being said, I'll put all these guys on blast. I don't give a shit. And that
Some
being
of the
said,
opinions, and this is actually just
that being said,
You were going to reach out to me, man.
that being said, hey, listen, we put guys on blast as well as we help them out, right? But that being said, this company had zero in place. The builder, who makes X amount of dollars, had a site supervisor that had zero training, guardrails missing everywhere, site safety board was missing 50% of the documentations, no fire extinguishers, no first aid kits. We're talking about zeros all across the board, maybe a 1. And what happened to these guys? MOL showed up, did 1-page report, and left. And that's the same story for those guys. And we can go back and talk about other criticals and investigations on bigger projects with some of the names that John mentioned.
1-page report.
Hey, yeah. Okay, send me the notice later. I got to go.
Wow, again,
But let's be honest here.
it's triaging, right?
Most inspectors are overtaxed and
Right.
overworked.
Sure,
It's
not
just-
blaming
it's-
the inspector,
you
but
know,
we're looking
there's
at the
so much
system.
that goes on, right? Let's be honest. They're all
Everyone-
reactive. Some
everyone-
of these guys are doing 2 or 3 accidents a day.
Sure, no, there's
But also the stressors that they're
Well, it's
and what
crazy.
you guys went
Crazy.
through on a daily basis. You're not going shopping and buying your next latest greatest tool or car. It's not a happy-go-lucky experience walking on a job site
No.
for the most
For
part.
some reason, they don't like us.
I enjoy my job.
Listen, you guys have visited. I've never had a problem. I've always been respectful.
Sure.
I've never been a dick. I get it. Have I had a perfect job site? Fuck no. That's not I don't think it exists. I challenge anybody to create a perfect job site, but
So
even
do I.
still, you're probably going to miss something.
One with no workers.
Vince was as polite as they come. He'd get to a roofing site and go, "Gentlemen, the fuck you doing up there?"
We don't have any engines up here. You want me to start them? What's going on?
Listen, everybody here has their experiences, and at this table has different experiences. One thing's for sure, we're all professional. We all kicked ass when we needed to kick ass. We all applied our discretion when we needed to apply our discretion. And I think those qualities make up a really good inspector, right? But you have to have the ability to kick some ass. You
There's
have
a
the
lot of
ability
training.
to get everybody
I would
back.
say teach some ass.
No,
The ministry won't do that though. Like the
My-
ministry has a wing.
Manny,
so
what happens when you come across these employers that don't give a shit? Metron case, I was happy to charge those guys. They deserved it.
the
they were
Ministry of-
scumbags.
Yeah, the Ministry of Labor is not there to teach. There is the prevention department, right? That does offer guidance and things of that nature, but they don't directly teach. They will refer you to one of the HSAs, right? So the Health and Safety Associations, whether it's PHSHA or IHSA or WSPS. The ministry is not there to teach. The ministry is there to enforce, right? And they spend a lot of money training us. Like just in the 8 months that an inspector goes through training, the cost associated with just that 8 months alone is about $80,000 per inspector. So imagine $80,000,
More.
and that's after.
I'd
So
say
that's
more.
that's a number I confirmed with a former
Those-
DLU, so Divisional Learning Unit staffer. That was the number just that 8 months alone. So that's like a 4-year university education in 8 months, and it costs them $80,000 to train inspectors. They're not about to go put those $80,000 inspectors out there for the remainder of the $240,000 that they're worth after 5 years in the industry as an inspector. They're not about to take that $80,000 invested into an inspector and say, "Yeah, go tell people how to fix their problems." They're going to say, "Go tell people that there's problems. Charge them when you feel that you have to."
Why not show them a roadmap at least, right?
Because that's what they will refer you. So the IHSA is funded by the WSIB as much as it's funded by its member organizations, right? So the Ministry of Labor is funded by the WSIB, the IHSA and the PHSHA or whatever it's called now, it's funded by the WSIB. So because we like I'm still an inspector, because the ministry has these partners, they're not going to tell you what you have to do. They're going to refer you to the IHSA to get that training from the IHSA. And look, the IHSA serves its place in the world, but I'm going to tell you, if you throw a bunch of consultants in front of me, and I've never been exposed to any of this, I'm going to take the individual like Kevin, who has charged supervisors and companies before, and I'm going to have him teach me why about supervisor due diligence and competency. So, just going back to the point, the inspector, there's a lot of money invested in that inspector. If you were to equate that educational value alone for that 8 months, the number that they have running in the Ministry of Labor DLU is $80,000 per inspector. That's a 4-year
That's just the training.
bachelor's degree.
That's not their wages. It's not their
That's
accommodations.
just their training.
It's a lot, right?
Right.
So they got a huge investment in the group, in the teams, right? I wanted to come back and just kind of address some of the things that Phil was talking about. In my experience, I have seen a lot of companies become really good companies and change, and it's leadership based. But usually they change when they have the right information, when they have the right knowledge, when they have the right guidance in the right directions. Because I've met many, many people, and I love this side of the business, to tell you the truth, because of the amount of people I meet that say, hey, I want to make a difference with my group. I want to do it. I just don't know what to do. And there's so much misinformation. There's not even misinformation, just so much information. There's so many opinions in the safety industry. Yeah. And, we struggle with what sometimes and how. There's a lot of struggle with how do I do safety, right? What is due diligence? How do I do these things? And I think where we provide, as a group, just as a knowledge base, is we come from a perspective of, well, here's all the things you weren't supposed to do. How's that, right? So I kind of know what you're not supposed to do. If I know how to charge you, I kind of know how to protect you. If that makes sense?
It does.
It's kind of like the ex-copper thought process, right? And bringing that knowledge so that people don't get into the situations of fatalities, so they don't get into the situations of being charged. If they understand ahead of time how important safety is from an operational standpoint, because if you just do safety and do production and do quality well, you're making money. I'll tell you that right now. Some of the biggest companies out here have learned that safety is an investment in production, right? Because if you feel unsafe, you tend not to do it. But if you're running safety, your clients are looking at you all the time. Yeah. I told roofers, if I ever went back to start a company, I'd start a roofing company. All my roofers would wear hard hats. They'd all be tied off all day long. And some of the low-rise builders out here would give me every contract because they know they're liable, right, for all the subs that are there too. So if we just invested in safety as a business thought process, right? I'm here to make money. Look how safe my company is. You're going to hire me. I'll tell you that right now because your liabilities are through the roof.
The majority of the industry doesn't start with that.
They're getting there. I think so. I think we're seeing a change. I've actually seen a change in safety in my career. I mean, I grew up in construction, let's be honest. There was one safety belt for 400 guys on a job site that hung in a, you've been there, right? We are seeing the shift. It's a slow shift. We're turning a ship. But I see the shift. I don't know if others are seeing the shift.
No, I'd have to agree with you, Kevin. At the top level of our system and the employers in this province, there's a shift. Yeah. Introduction of ISO, introduction of CORE, all these accreditation programs, et cetera, tying it in with production, tying it in with contracts. Yes. But I think the measurement of our entire health and safety system is measured by the weakest links. And the weakest links are the companies that are operating, under that threshold. And, I've been in construction since I was 15 years old. I've done a variety of things.
Against the law.
I speak languages. What?
That's against
the law. You're working at 15 years old.
Since you were 16.
Hey,
what the laws were different back then.
No, it was the same law for 60
what
years.
They say the best cops are criminals, man?
Yeah.
If it counts, I had a beard at 13.
Right? I got my first timer when I was 5, man. I don't know about you guys. But, I think that the gap is just widening with the haves and the have-nots. And,
I'd say so.
The gap is widening. A lot of the ingredients for further exploitation of the workforce are here.
Yep.
And I think that you have some of these ingredients, which is vulnerable workers, lack of enforcement, and some of these other ingredients where you got cash and a whole bunch of other stuff, I think is just playing into, holy shit, I'm getting away with this, and nobody's saying shit.
I know.
Right? And we all know those companies. And going back to that company, they called me. I go over there. They got nothing. Everybody has zeros all around, and nothing happens. Should somebody have been charged? I think so. I think there should have been a bunch of charges laid there. Right? Is this company...
We can't recommend them, right? We have to let the ministry do their job. And if...
Well, based on my experience,
right.
I would have charged for a lot less.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, this is what I have to have faith that the Ministry of Labor, out of all of the government services that are, and departments that are in the government, I have to have faith that the Ministry of Labor is the one that cares about people the most. Now, do they have logistical challenges and staffing challenges? Absolutely. They had them when we were there. They still have them now. But I have to have faith that they act in the best interest of the worker and the public. And you're going to have, look, as an inspector, there were situations where I issued charges that they didn't, legal didn't pursue. Yeah, and I could have been really butthurt about that if I wanted to. But, I had people like, Vince standing behind me saying, listen, don't take it personally, right? You did your job and let it go now. So on this, it's the same about the private side. So, Phil's point, like, oh, they should have charged, or they should have done this, or they should have done that. I mean, we just have to let it go, right? I can't force the ministry.
The unfortunate thing is that you have to let it go, but you know that there's going to be another situation on their right.
Of course.
I can't force them to do their job.
The only thing it's doing is almost encouraging this type of behavior from the workforce or from the employers.
Yeah.
Listen,
I'm getting away with it.
If you as an organization can't learn from a traumatic event and you have to wait to get charged, and you're a sad
You should not be in the industry.
All I'm saying is that charges and traumatic events should go hand in hand.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the investigation will determine whether or not that's the case or not. But, just dealing with a traumatic event and just knowing what it's done to individuals should tell you enough that is not what you want to do with or deal with ever again, right?
Yeah, and common sense would say that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, going back to what I said before, I think it's a necessity where there needs to be some kind of mandatory training for organizations once they get into business. They need to understand the system.
Yeah, this was a conversation that came up at the ministry, right? Like when you apply to be a business, here you go, good luck. And they don't even know what's required. Yeah, here's a piece of paper, start your company, off you go. All right, you've hired some employees, good for that, right? There's nothing there.
You know how many guys we've come across that didn't know the Ministry of Labor existed?
They don't even know who you are.
God.
They thought we were immigration.
No English?
They thought we were immigration most times.
Yeah.
Really?
But that's a business, right? Like most businesses start off with no safety experience, and then they learn and they do safety based on what they know. But they do safety on what they know. The problem is what they don't know, right? And there's a lot of things that they don't know. And then to the point of the ministry, we're trained like crazy. We go on site thinking, well, Section 42, Part 3, Sub C 6, you should have done that, right?
Yeah,
like
sorry,
so exactly. It's the one I just made up. I'll write it for you. But to your point and to John's point and Vince's point, for me personally, I as a safety person have to have faith in my fellow human beings that they want to do the right thing. I have to.
It's hard these days,
right?
Man. It's hard to have faith in the
Right.
government.
But you know
It's
what?
hard to
I
have
still
faith
have
in
the faith.
You
I have to
have
have that faith because it allows
Yeah.
me to go out and help.
You have to have a balance between total enforcement and proactivity, though, because look, I agree with and I understand the role that the enforcement agency plays. Right, it's the same role that the police play in the public in the public sphere. But you have to strike a balance, right? If you rule with an iron fist, there's going to be revolution. There almost always is in every instance across the span of time in history, right? You have to make people want to be safer.
Sure.
And I'm going to make you want to be safer, not by bonking you on the head with a hammer every time you pop your head up, right? There's different ways to make people want to be safer. Either they've experienced something traumatic and that automatically wants them to be safer, or they're hooking up with people like Kevin or like Phil or anyone else to say this is why I want to be better, or maybe there's a business case.
Experiences, so they never have
right?
to experience it
so,
themselves.
but there has to be a ground between total enforcement and
sure.
and proactivity. People should want to be better. I shouldn't be afraid. Listen, I have 3 children, right? They're small children. There's a place for enforcement in my house. There definitely is, right? But at the same time, I want my son to appreciate me, my sons and my daughter, to appreciate me more than they fear me, to love me more than they fear me, right? 100%. So could the Ministry of Labor be doing more on the proactive side? Absolutely. Should there be more done from the Chief Prevention Office? Absolutely, right? But the problem is like, look, you've hammered the nail so hard. We're upping the fines. They went from $500,000 max per charge to $1.5 million per charge to $2 million. Not even a year and a bit later, right? You have the ministry bopping you on the head. Upping the charges has not dropped the amount of incidents.
But it also has not increased the amounts of fines on average. Just because the max fine is $2 million.
Right.
We're still looking at an average for a fatality of $150K.
Right. So it's
they can put $10 million there.
Right. You just because you can't use fear tactics. Like, and this is why creative sentencing, in my opinion, I'm gonna keep going back to it.
I agree with
because
you 100%.
in Alberta, creative sentencing changes people. Now I'm gonna force you to, create a program that you're gonna train across the organization, across the industry about how this fatality affected you. Right. Like bopping people on the head will not make them want to change. It'll make them hate. It'll make them resent you even more. And when I tell my son not to do something, if I tell my son not to do something and I threaten him because of it, he's going to do it behind my back. That's not what I want.
There has to be some disciplinary action. There has to be an enforcement component to the rules, even within an employer. I have a bunch of rules. If my workers all say, I don't want to follow my rules, then what? What do I say as an employer to these workers? Hey, let's talk about it.
But there's more that the ministry could be doing on the proactive prevention side.
But even as an inspector, you have the ability to take different approaches. Like I said before, I used to issue out orders to get retraining. There's times when I had a guy call his wife so that I can tell her that he was working not tied off.
That one's a classic.
And he fell. Yeah, I did that too. That was the best.
Right? And to see the fear on his face and knowing that he had to explain to his
That's a good one.
Right?
Against the rules, though. Yeah. Listen, if there's inspectors listening, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that, inspectors.
We did it, and we didn't get caught making people call their wives. But we're not telling you to do it.
We gotta wrap
the
it
opinions
up.
of this panel.
Just do whatever you want, man.
We gotta wrap it up, but I definitely want to get from you guys, all of you guys, as a business owner, as a tradesperson, and as the government, what's the number one thing that they should do tomorrow?
Fuck, call me.
All three of them?
Call me, you need help.
Yeah, yes.
If
All
your
three of
Instagram
those.
Say that
interesting,
John
yeah.
referred you.
Oh, wow. What can you do to start? Well, you got to kind
Business
of
owner, tradesperson, and government.
you got to look in the mirror, see where the hell you're at, try to figure out where you want to be, and figure out what work needs to go into it to get you there. If you're an owner of a company and you don't care, you won't self-reflect. If you're the owner of a company and you do care, you will self-reflect and you'll take necessary steps to get to where you want to go.
I think as a business owner, you have to realize that safety plays a humongous role in order for you to be successful. If you are a fly-by-night contractor who just wants to make a buck here and disappear, that's a different story. But if you want to be around for the long haul, you better get educated and understand what legislation is and what your role is and what your expectations are. Government, I think at the end of the day, you need to invest more on your inspectors.
Yep.
The truth of the matter is that you're not really a great inspector until probably you're 10 or so or whatever it is. You have to experience all the different things. But they have to allow that to happen. And give the inspectorate a little bit more freedom and allow them to continue with the role, because I know there's a lot more inspectors that are leaving a lot quicker now than they ever was. Before it used to be a lifer job. You get in it and you stay in there until the day you retire. Not so much anymore.
No.
So
And the management probably plays a big role in that, and the director.
yeah, there's various reasons why, but yeah.
I think one of the most important things is to actually know what you don't know, right? To understand, safety can only be done to the highest level of knowledge in that organization, and that would include the government, to tell you the truth. And to know what you don't know and to seek professional assistance where you need it. It's just like John said, backfill your weaknesses. That's the most important part. But that would be advice to the contractor, that'd be advice to a company, and that would be the same advice to the government itself. Backfill some of your weaknesses because there's a lot of experience that has left your doors.
Are you making those T-shirts or what?
No.
Backfill
that one?
your weaknesses?
Backfill your weaknesses. There you go. It's a whole book. You can write it.
I don't own a consulting company, so
there you go. I say seek out advice. For me, from a safety perspective, I'm not here to see how much money I can make off you. I'm here to make a difference. That's it. Come and see me. I'll help you do whatever you need to do, right? If you need a good program, we'll put good programs. If you need safety, we'll do safety.
Focus on this so that you
if
can
you need
focus on
somebody
your
full-time on
business.
your site, we'll tell you that, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't need me, I'll tell you, you don't need me either. I'm the first to tell you. And I have clients that we've helped. They've shifted. Their cultures have shifted. We never hear from them unless they need us or they have that one weird question that they just can't figure out how to answer. They'll call us for that stuff.
See, that was always my mindset. I always wanted to just see you guys once.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that?
Well, now you can see
I don't
me all
want
the
to
time.
see you on a
You
weekly
can hire
basis,
us.
on a monthly basis.
There's some
on the
workers-
site I'm talking about.
There's
on the
some
site.
workers in this province that have never seen an
They've never
inspector
seen
in their
an
entire
inspector.
lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been doing training, I'll say, for the last, towards the end of the year, the beginning of the year is usually annual training time. And this is one question I ask every single training course that I do. When's the last time you've seen an inspector? The average answer, based on thousands of workers,
Never.
I'll say 6 years is the average. 5, 6.
The
Good, solid human oversight makes the biggest
What-
difference in safety.
So the question was asked, what advice would you give to a business owner? Okay. If you're a business owner and you have a family of your own, when you get home at the end of your day or when you wake up in the morning and you give your children a kiss or a hug, or if they're teenagers and they don't want to touch you, and you say, hey, I'm home, I love you, keep that scene in your mind and consider that everybody else who works for you is doing the exact same thing with their kids, right?
Good advice.
So culture is safety culture is a sub-component of organizational culture. But ultimately culture is, to put it easiest, it's how your stomach feels on Sunday night about work on Monday morning, right? So if I sum it up that way, take a step back, look at your organization and say, what's the culture like here, right? Am I having people willingly expose themselves to hazard because they feel like they have to rush to get it done because I'm going to yell at them? Just consider what's important in your own life, right? And realize that you can have two different personas, the business owner persona and the father or husband or, wife or mother persona are two different things. They're not. You are one individual. You will only ever be one individual. So just remember what's important to you at that point in time. When you go to work, what's important to you is getting home to the people who love you, and that's going to be what's important to every one of your staff. So make sure that you're supporting them in that regard. To the government, I would have to agree with everything Vince said. I mean, consider... look, again, I don't say anything bad about the government. I had a great time there. But...
John,
if they
when there's
paid
a lot of
us,
people
oh my
listening,
God!
yeah.
listen, if
we
they
could do a whole
if-
podcast on just that.
if they staffed our offices a little bit better, especially in Toronto, right? If they paid them a living wage in 2024,
My God.
you're probably going to keep more people around. I mean, the inspector is the most qualified safety professional in our industry. I don't care, hands down. You could have every accreditation and acronym at the end of your name in the world. You will never come close to the experience that an inspector has, right? Mm-hmm. But that inspector's paid $75,000 a year.
That's the base?
I believe so.
75,
77.
70,
Like
something like that. Yeah.
So come on.
Junior safety people make
And
that.
then you go through pay freeze. I was there 5 years and change. I went through 2 pay freezes.
It's not enough.
Right. So, I mean, and I know that there's politics involved in all that stuff, but you train these inspectors so well. You spend so much, time and money making them the best safety professionals in the industry, hands down. You might want to consider.
There's a lot of guys that end up taking pay cuts in order to take that job.
I did.
Mm-hmm. I closed my
Right.
company to become
Everybody
an
here did. We
Is it
took a
getting
pay
worse?
cut. It's the same.
It's the same.
It's the same. So consider my advice.
So they're
to the
not
government.
feeding that
No.
sector.
No,
which
because
is something that we
they
need.
sell you on the whole quality of life. But the problem is that what they miss is that dollars is a huge component of quality of
My
life.
kids don't eat
Yeah,
quality
but
of life.
That's right. Like I need the money to pay for my kids'
Well, it's funny the
volleyball
government
or
is
whatever it
telling
may
the
be.
employers to spend money on safety and educate and learn everything, but then they're freezing or holding back on the enforcement.
One thing's for sure. A lot of things have switched within the government in the last 5 years. A lot of people are disgruntled with some of the things that are happening in the safety profession, in the safety business, in our safety system. I'm disgruntled about some of the things that are happening, and why? Because, I'll keep it nice. I'll keep it nice, guys. But a lot of people
that have come before me, have come, during Vince's time, a lot of the senior guys and a lot of the management, and
I'm not that old.
Yeah, you call them a senior.
Senior.
That's just
Glad he called you a senior.
This is time when he would show up in a carriage. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. man.
what I'm saying is a lot of people have put in hard work and effort to raise the bar of health and safety in this province, and I think in the last 5 years that bar has gotten knocked
been wasted.
down and wasted, and now we're in a holy shit. What do we do to try to bring up this
The
bar?
government's in a
again?
reactive mode.
Yeah, and that's where we're at again.
Gentlemen, can you share your deets again? And then I definitely want to ask the 12 questions of you three gentlemen because John has done it. And then we can wrap up the show. This has been a very enlightening conversation. I know every time I speak to any one of you guys, it makes me want to get on a job site and be safer. And I'm aware of it now, but unfortunately, I'm not on the job sites these days, right?
So Kevin Brown with Cobalt Safety.
Website or anything? How to get a hold of it?
CobaltSafety.ca.
Okay.
Or if you want a supervisor course, go to supervisorduediligence.com. It's a great course. I highly recommend it. I've been training it for 10 years right across Canada.
Nice.
Vince Iacolino, National Director of Health and Safety for Prodigy Construction. We deal with ICI, a lot of commercial banking, retail stores, and private schools.
Yeah, I'm Phillip Ferreira, S1 Consulting. You can find us on Instagram at my_S1 or our webpage, mys1s.ca. And I'd like to take the time and opportunity to give a quick shout out to my team. I couldn't be here without them, and all my clients and my family.
John?
John Savoia. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. So, yeah, it's I don't know if you want to link my LinkedIn profile.
No, I'll totally add it from the other. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, just I'm most active on LinkedIn.
I want to. Sorry, I want to thank Vince for not going to the bathroom during the show.
It's all the water you gave us.
So anybody's watching the show and people are
Did you see
crossing the
that?
camera while we're going. Vince and I were the only ones.
The old guy is able to hold it in. Yeah.
We held it in,
He went to the bathroom. He just didn't leave.
Jesus.
That's a low blow, man. What is your favorite construction word, guys?
I love heavy civil. I love heavy civil construction. In my career now, what we do, we see everything. So we do everything from event safety, so concerts, like setting stages up, all the way through to manufacturing, all the way into tower cranes and tunnels. So to tell you the truth, I love all of it. Construction, no. Heavy civil. I'm probably a pseudo water main
So
guy
it's
at
word,
heart.
not work.
What's that?
Word.
Oh, save as word. What's my favorite construction word?
I like the story about the civil.
Well, yeah,
Totally,
sorry.
I was visualizing
What's
it.
your favorite safety word?
What's my favorite?
Could be safety word, yeah.
Work word?
Yeah, well, the most important word in safety is safety, and what does it mean? And it just means the act or condition of being safe.
Yeah.
Construction word. That's a good one.
Hurry the up.
That would be more than just one word. But.
Could be a phrase.
On the caralho.
Well, a lot of it you can sum up with what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah, it's true.
There's espresso in the trailer.
That's your favorite one?
That was a question. Where's the espresso machine? Yeah.
What's yours, Phil?
I think it's like get her done. That's my favorite construction word. Get her done safely.
Least favorite tool?
Hand grinders. 4 to 5 plastic surgeons recommend you take the guards off hand grinders.
We all seen the videos. I know. We
I got
get
the
it.
pictures. I got the stories.
Doesn't really resonate until they actually get it by their groin.
I have that story too.
Grinders, yeah.
Grinders,
Yeah,
eh?
I don't think I've ever seen a grinder with a guard on it unless you have to tell them to put it on.
You can buy them in the store, I
Yeah.
think.
They're in the box.
Yeah, I know.
They're still in the box.
Favorite tool?
Least favorite.
Least
tool.
favorite.
Least favorite? Anything that shoots a projectile. Nail guns.
Hilti
and
gun?
Hilties. And stuff like that.
Construction sound you guys love.
I love the sound of pile drivers. Just sounds like pure power.
Unless you're working in the office right next to that.
Yeah.
It's just a sound. I don't
I've
want to
been
be.
there
I don't want to be
before.
excited all the time. I just love the
love
sound
that
of
too,
it.
man.
It just sounds like a whole lot of energy just coming to a
Something
complete
big
stop.
coming, yeah.
It's just bang.
I started off in demo, so I would say a shear on an excavator.
I'm going old school here with the jackhammer.
It's too loud, man. Favorite beverage?
Coffee.
Yeah, coffee.
Sumo Lareja.
Aranja? No, pineapple.
Pineapple? You're from the islands. That's what.
Worst and best thing about construction?
Worst and best thing. Skip me for a second. Let me think about it.
Vince?
Best thing, people. Worst thing, weather.
We had a nice winter.
Yeah, we had a good one.
Now
this
you
year.
jinxed it. So.
Nah, they're saying it's coming next year.
Oh, sorry. This to me.
Yep.
What's the question again?
Worst and best thing about construction?
Worst and best thing about construction. I'd have to go with the people as the best thing about construction. You got such a wide variety of different types of people. Also, the worst thing about construction, the people. Some people you come across, you just want to punch them in the face.
I think the worst thing about construction is failures. When we see construction failure, and anyway, you can have structural failures, you can have human failures. And I think the coolest thing about construction is the things that human beings can build.
Sure. For sure.
You know, like all of us here at construction, we drive around. I guarantee you, I've driven my wife nuts. You see that bridge? Yeah, I built that bridge. Yeah, see that gutter over there? Yeah, I did that. There's a sewer under there. Nobody will ever see it, but we did that, right? You know, it's being proud of the things that we as humans can construct.
Favorite curse word? In any language.
Foda-se caralho. Favorite one.
You want to translate that for the people who don't speak?
Oh, I think everyone's listening. They know it.
Go figure it out, man. You go on the job site. You don't have to be Portuguese to know what that means.
Yeah, I'm not Portuguese, but I've used food-this a lot of times. No.
I know that one too because I grew up in the sewer water main industry. It's just how you talk. It's construction vernacular. For me, it was probably FU because I think that was my name for about 7 years.
As an inspector?
Yeah.
I thought it was Shut 'em Down Brown.
It is Shut 'em Down Brown.
Shut 'em down,
and
Brown
yeah.
was the nickname.
Shut him down, Brown.
Yeah,
That he
yeah.
got after a while.
Yeah, it just kind of rhymes.
Oh,
What's the favorite?
what happened to all the enforcement dogs? Shut them down, bro.
What's your favorite vehicle? Any mode of transportation?
Oh, fuck.
Dream?
Any
vehicle?
mode, any vehicle in the entire world, anything at all.
If I could, a Lambo would be my choice.
Which one?
Aventador.
Me? Any choice? F-35. Fighter jet. That's where I would go. Hey.
I'm
Why
doing my
not?
pilot's license, so I'd be all
You don't
all
even
over
go
that
with the
one, right?
F-15?
Yeah.
No, we're
It's
going
got the
F-
most confirmed kills of any fighter jet out there.
We're going with the F-35 for the vertical takeoffs, man. It's pretty cool.
Mine's a Jaguar F-Type. I love the car.
It's
Yeah.
a nice one. What do you guys miss from your childhood?
My parents. It's true.
Sure.
You went dark with that.
Yeah, really quick.
It's just a true story. What do you want?
The lack of stress.
Oh, my God. Very
what I
much.
miss.
Yeah, it's been all downhill since then. What do I enjoy most about
What
my
What do you miss from
What
your
do you
childhood?
miss?
You know what? My kids give me another chance to relive my childhood again. So, you know, we're up watching Sunday or Saturday morning cartoons and stuff, but I don't
It's
know.
for you, not for them, man.
I know. I'll squeeze in some He-Man every once in a while with them.
He-Man. He-Man.
And I'm the old one.
Yeah, exactly.
What profession other than your own would you guys like to attempt one day?
Soldier.
Pilot.
Yeah.
Pilot, soldier? Soldier, pilot.
Jet,
Which,
Pilot for me.
jet fighter.
a jet fighter. You guys don't want to be on the ground, eh?
No.
We've done that.
What profession do you guys not want to do?
Oh, my God.
GC.
not want to do?
I said paramedic.
I was gonna say paramedic, combat medic probably would be.
Right now, it's probably easy. You're not doing anything.
You still wouldn't want to do it.
No.
Don't get started,
probably
John.
EMTs.
Don't. Let's shy away from the military conversations because
What's yours?
I don't know. I think paramedic would probably be the one I would not want to do just because of your response to specific scenes and
kids and stuff like
And you
that.
never really see the outcome, right? You respond and then you hand them off. Actually, a 911 operator is also very hard.
That's hard.
Because they respond to the call, they hand it off, and never know what happens to that call.
Last question. If heaven exists, what would you guys like to hear God say when you arrive at those pearly gates?
You did well.
Welcome, and not we're closed for you.
Based on your record,
Yeah.
we're surprised you're here.
Oh, gentlemen, thank you very much. Honestly,
Thanks for having
thank you so
us,
much
Manny.
for making
Thank
the
you,
time
Manny.
and coming in here. And John, thanks again for setting this up and getting you guys in here. I'd love to have you guys back whenever you guys want to and continue the conversation.
great.
I had fun today.
Hopefully, it's educating the industry a little bit. That's all I can hope for. I definitely think it is.
It's definitely the cheaper way to educate the industry.
It's true. We know what you mean by that, 100%.
Yep.
So,
Thanks, Manny.
thanks again,
All right,
guys.
thank you.
We're out of here, Angelina.